The warp breach screamed, not with sound. Sound required air, physics, the mercy of natural law, but with a psychic shriek that carved through reality like a rusted blade through soft flesh. On the shattered world of Varsavia Tertius, 300 kilometers from what had once been the planetary capital, the sky tore open above the blackened ruins of Hive Mortenval. Purple light bled from the wound. The air tasted of copper and rot. Sister Commander Kalith Varn felt nothing. That was her gift, her curse. The genetic modification that had stolen her voice, her presence in the warp, her very soul's echo. It armored her against the madness spilling from that rent in space. Around her, 19 Sisters of Silence held formation in the shadow of a toppled administratum tower, their blackstone talismans cold against their chests, their bolters steady despite the ground bucking beneath their boots. The anathema Saikana, the Emperor's silent judgment given human form. Kalith raised one fist. Absolute stillness rippled through her cadre. Through the visor of her Umbra pattern helm, she watched the breach pulse. Something was coming through. Not the gibbering hordes of Neverborn that had plagued this theater for 6 months since Cadia's fall. Not the usual corruption. This felt different, focused, wrong in a new way that made her want to check her equipment, even though she'd inspected it twice in the last hour. The breach contracted. A figure fell through. He dropped 15 meters and hit the rubble in a crouch that should have shattered both legs. Dust exploded outward. When it cleared, Kalith's auspex glitched, static and null readings tangled together in a pattern she'd never seen. Join the ranks of the faithful. Subscribe now, strike the notification bell, and let the Emperor shield our cause in the dark millennium. The figure rose slowly, and she saw him properly for the first time. A man, unarmored, wearing some kind of fitted crimson bodysuit that looked ceremonial, impractical, foreign to any imperial aesthetic she recognized. No helm, no rebreather despite the toxic air. Dark hair. A cloth wrapped around his eyes like a blindfold, soaked in blood that might have been his own or someone else's. He held no weapon she could identify, yet he moved with the coiled readiness of a killer who'd forgotten how to be anything else. Kalith's second-in-command, Sister Tessa Kor, signed rapid battle cant. Unknown. Warp touched. Eliminate. The blind man's head snapped toward them. Impossible. They were 200 meters distant, concealed behind debris, wrapped in the null field that made them invisible to psychic senses. He shouldn't know they existed, but he smiled. Not a friendly expression, a predator's acknowledgement of other predators sharing the same hunting ground. Then, the demons came. They erupted from the ruins like maggots from a corpse, lesser Neverborn, barely cohesive, fragments of spite and hunger given temporary flesh by the warp storm's proximity. 12 of them, claws like obsidian, mouths full of geometries that hurt to perceive. They converged on the blind man with the single-minded focus of parasites detecting fresh meat. Kalith prepared the firing order. Her cadre would eliminate the demons, then contain or destroy the anomaly. Standard protocol. Clean. Simple. The blind man moved. He twisted between the first demon's claws with a precision that spoke of sight, except he had none. His fist caught the creature's throat, and she heard bone crack even at this distance. The demon dissipated. He was already spinning, using the momentum to drive his boot through the knee analog of a second Neverborn. It collapsed, shrieking in frequencies that made her null field shudder, and he finished it with a strike to what passed for its skull. No hesitation, no wasted movement. He fought like someone who'd mapped every enemy's position through senses Kalith couldn't name. A third Daemon lunged from his blind spot, a laughable term given his condition, and he dropped flat, letting it sail overhead. His hand found a piece of rebar in the rubble. He rose and drove the improvised weapon through the demon's center mass with enough force to pin it to a wall. It thrashed once and evaporated. Sister Kor's fingers blurred. Impossible accuracy. Psyker. But Kalith's Auspex still read null adjacent, not a psyker. Something else. Something that made her genetic modification itch in a way she'd never experienced. The blind man dismantled 4 more demons in the span of 20 seconds. Brutal efficiency married to an almost casual grace. When the last Neverborn died, he stood among the dissipating ectoplasm and turned his covered eyes directly toward Kalith's position again. He tilted his head, listening. To what? Their hearts? Their breath in the recycled air of their armor? The micro-vibrations of their boots on rubble? Kalith made her decision. She stepped into the open, bolter lowered but ready, and her cadre flowed out behind her in perfect formation. The blind man didn't move, didn't reach for a weapon he didn't seem to carry. He simply waited, hands loose at his sides, while 19 of the Imperium's most lethal witch hunters surrounded him with enough firepower to level a building. She activated her Voxcaster. Her voice had been taken, but technology still served, and the synthesized words crackled into the toxic air. Identify yourself. By whose authority do you walk this world? The blind man's smile widened. When he spoke, his voice carried an accent she couldn't place, words shaped by a tongue that had never learned Low Gothic as a first language. I don't know where I am. I don't know how I got here, but I know what those things were. He gestured to the fading demon stains. And I know there are more, many more. I can hear them in the distance, taste them on the air, feel their wrongness vibrating through the ground. He paused. You hunt them, I can tell. You're built for it somehow. Different from the monsters, but different from normal people too. Kalith's grip tightened on her bolter. He'd assessed them, classified them, all without seeing a single detail. So here's my offer, the blind man continued, and now his smile vanished, replaced by something harder, something that had looked into darkness and learned to become darkness in return. Point me at whatever passes for evil in this hell you call home. I'll help you kill it. And maybe, if we both survive, you'll help me understand what just happened to my entire reality. Thunder rolled across the dead hive. In the distance, cultist war drums started their rhythm. The warp breach pulsed again, and this time, something vast stirred behind it. Something that noticed them, noticed him. Kalith's tactical instinct warred with protocol, an anomaly, potentially corrupted, definitely dangerous. The Inquisition would demand his immediate termination or transport to a black cell for study. But she'd seen him kill demons with his bare hands and rebar, and the drums were getting closer. She signaled her cadre, contain, observe, execute on my order. To the blind man through her Vox synth, walk ahead of us, slowly. If you reach for anything, you die. If you run, you die. If you compromise this mission, you die. Understood? His covered eyes seemed to meet hers despite the impossibility. Perfectly. He started walking toward the drum sound, toward the rising screams of the possessed, toward whatever fresh nightmare was crawling out of the warp. And Kalith followed, leading her sisters into the dark, wondering what she'd just unleashed, or what had just been delivered to her. The breach pulsed once more, then sealed shut with a sound like a giant's indrawn breath. The blind man paused mid-step, head cocked, listening to something only he could hear. They know I'm here now, he said quietly. Whatever's in charge, it's interested. Sister Kor signed a question Kalith didn't answer, because she wanted to know the same thing. Interested in killing him or interested in using him? 8 cultists broke from cover ahead, corrupted humans wearing the tattered remains of Manufactorum uniforms. Their flesh bulged with tumors, their eyes wept black ichor. They charged with mindless fury. The blind man flowed forward. His elbow caught one cultist's throat. A palm strike shattered another's sternum. He seized the third by its wrist, twisted until tendons snapped, then used its body as a shield when the fourth fired a stubber pistol. The remaining cultists fell in seconds, efficient, brutal, no wasted motion. "You could have helped," he said mildly, turning toward Calith. "I assume those are weapons you're carrying." "You required no assistance," Calith stated. "No," he agreed, "but it would have been faster." Tactically sound reasoning. Calith filed that observation. Sister Lyra approached with her auspex, circling the blind man slowly. The device hummed as it sampled the air around him. When it completed its scan, the reading showed null adjacent, present but obscured, real but unreadable. "What does that mean?" the blind man asked, listening to the auspex's tone shifts. "You register as neither fully present nor fully absent in the warp," Calith said. "You exist in a state our instruments classify as paradoxical." "That tracks," he said quietly. "I've always been different, enhanced senses compensating for lost vision. Here, everything's louder, sharper, like someone turned every dial past maximum." He paused, head tilting toward the horizon where drums still echoed. "But those things, the demons, they're wrong in a way that has nothing to do with senses. They feel like violations, like reality itself is screaming around them." Calith accessed her tactical archive, searching for precedent. This man's capabilities exceeded known classifications, and that made him either valuable or catastrophically dangerous. "What is your designation?" she asked. "My name," he corrected. "Matthew Murdoch. Most people call me Matt. Some call me other things. Lawyer, vigilante, devil." His smile returned, thin and dark. "That last one's probably most accurate right now." The drums stopped. Complete silence fell. No wind, no screams, just profound quiet that made Calith's modification itch. Matthew Murdoch's head snapped up. "They're here," he whispered. The ground split open, and three massive shapes erupted from below. Demonettes of Slanesh, 8 meters tall, flesh warped into obscene mockery of beauty. They screamed in harmonics that tried to bypass conscious thought. "Bolter rounds, sanctified," Calith commanded. "Concentrated fire." The sisters opened up. Matthew moved with them, not away, charging into the kill zone like he belonged there, like fighting demons was something he'd always done. And Calith watched the blind man from another world prove himself in the only currency that mattered in this universe: survival through violence. When the last demon fell, Matthew stood among the ichor stains, breathing hard but functional. "What do you call yourselves?" he asked. "We are the Anathema Sicana," Calith said. "The Silent Sisters, the Emperor's talons against the warp." Matthew nodded slowly. "Then I guess I'm working for your Emperor now, at least until I figure out how to get home." He wouldn't get home. Calith knew that, with cold certainty. The warp didn't give back what it took, but she didn't tell him that. Not yet. The null field hit Matthew Murdoch like a wall of frozen silence. One moment he existed in overwhelming sensory chaos, every heartbeat within 200 meters a drum, every breath a whisper, every footfall a seismic event. The next moment, nothing. A void where 19 human-shaped absences walked, their presence marked only by the negative space they carved from his awareness. He stumbled. Sister Commander Calith caught his arm before he fell. Her grip was iron-strong, servo-assisted pressure through ceramite plating. But her heartbeat, gone. Her breath, silent. She existed as a cold outline, a statue wearing human shape. Terror clawed up his throat. This was worse than blindness. His world radar was collapsing into static. "Release him," Calith's synthesized voice commanded. Matthew forced himself to breathe. The ground still transmitted vibrations. Air still carried scent. Sound still traveled. He could work with this. He had to. "What are you?" he asked. "My senses can't perceive you properly. It's like you're not really there." "We are the Anathema Psychona," Calith responded. "The Emperor's talons. We exist as voids in the warp, nulls in the immaterium. Our purpose is to hunt that which you fought. Our nature makes us invisible to witch sight and immune to corruption." Psychic blanks. Anti-magic in a universe where magic was real and malevolent. Tactically brilliant. Personally nightmarish for someone whose combat methodology relied on reading opponents through enhanced senses. The ground tremor intensified. "How many?" Calith asked. Matthew focused past the void zones. 3, large, 200 meters and closing, moving with coordinated purpose from beneath and above ground. He filtered auditory data. 40+ hostiles, organized, waiting for the underground contacts to engage. Sister Kor's hands moved in silent language. Calith responded in kind. "Can you fight while we maintain null field proximity?" Calith asked. Matthew tested his balance. The void sensation had stabilized slightly, his brain adapting, compensating. Not ideal, but functional. "I'll have to," he said. The ground erupted. What came through defied classification. Matthew's spatial sense built a model from sonic reflection. 8 meters tall, vaguely humanoid but wrong in every proportion. Arms too long, ending in blade clusters. Torso warped, ribs visible through translucent skin pulsing with internal light. The stench hit him. Spoiled incense, burning hair, something sweet underneath that made his stomach clench. "Demonette," Calith stated. "Slaaneshi lesser nobility, bolter rounds sanctified, concentrated fire." The sisters opened up. Explosive rounds cratered demon flesh. It screamed, a sound that tried to be beautiful, musical, seductive. Matthew's enhanced hearing caught harmonics that wanted to bypass his conscious mind. He didn't let them. The demon charged through the firestorm. 2 more erupted behind it. Cultists poured from concealment above, 40 hostiles becoming immediate threat. Matthew's world narrowed to pure reaction. A cultist broke through the sisters' firing line. Matthew heard it coming, heavy footfalls, rasping breath, chain weapon revving. He sidestepped the swing, tracked the return stroke by air displacement, drove his fist into where the cultist's kidney should be. The cultist folded. Matthew transitioned into a spinning kick that connected with another attacker he hadn't consciously tracked. But he was half a second slower than usual. The void zones disrupted his flow. A chain axe grazed his shoulder, parting his suit's material and scoring flesh beneath. First blood. Unacceptable. Matthew dropped low, swept a cultist's legs, drove his elbow into its throat as it fell. Rolled right, evading a downward strike. Came up inside another attacker's guard and delivered a palm strike that stopped its heart. A sister of silence moved through his engagement zone, a null-shaped absence his predictions couldn't account for. He adjusted mid-strike, pulled his punch to avoid hitting her. That hesitation cost him. A cultist's blade opened a cut across his ribs. Second blood. This wasn't working. "I need to know where you are," Matthew shouted. "You're blind spots. I can't fight effectively if I can't predict your positions." Calith's response came immediate. "Sister Kor, proximity beacon, audible range." One of the voids suddenly emitted a soft, regular pulse, a subtle clicking Matthew's hearing isolated instantly. A navigation aid. He built the sister's position into his mental map, and his combat flow smoothed back toward efficiency. But only one beacon. 18 other voids remained. The lead demonette moved with obscene grace. Matthew tracked it by displaced air, impact of feet on rubble, wet breathing sounds. It swept one bladed arm toward Sister Lyra, who rolled under the strike and fired into the demon's knee. The demon stumbled, and Kalith was there, driving her power sword through its chest. The demon laughed as it died, a sound promising pleasures beyond flesh. It dissipated, reality wound closing like atmosphere rushing to fill vacuum. 2 demons remained. 20 cultists had been reduced to perhaps 15. The sisters fought with machine precision, each movement economical, lethal, coordinated through silent communication. Matthew found his rhythm in the spaces between their void zones, learning to predict their movements through elimination rather than detection. Where he couldn't sense a sister, he could sense what the cultists weren't attacking. A cultist charged from his 11 o'clock. Matthew sidestepped, redirected its momentum into a support pillar, finished it with a strike to the skull base while its brain was rattled. Another attacked from behind. He heard the breath before the scream, ducked under the swing, swept its legs. It fell into another cultist's line of fire. Friendly fire solved his problem. The second demon died under concentrated bolter fire, body shredded until warp essence couldn't maintain cohesion. The third realized it was losing. Matthew felt the shift from assault to retreat. It moved toward a collapsed building. "It's running," Matthew called, heading for the transit tunnel, northeast corner. "Intercept," Kalith commanded. 3 sisters moved to cut off escape. The demon changed direction. Matthew tracked its trajectory, predicted its next move, positioned himself in its path. The demon stopped, studied him. Then it spoke, voice resonating inside his skull. "You do not belong. You taste of elsewhere. Show me what you fear, broken thing." Pressure built behind Matthew's eyes. Something probed at his mind, searching for entry, for cracks where trauma lived, and found them. The demon smiled as it tasted his past, his father's death, his mother's abandonment, Electra's murder, Karen bleeding out while he held her, every failure, every doubt. Matthew felt the demon digging through his memories like fingers through open wounds. Then the null field intensified. Kalith had moved directly beside him, and her presence, her absolute absence in the warp, cut the demon's psychic assault like a blade through spider silk. The pressure vanished. Matthew gasped, tasting blood where he'd bitten through his lip. The demon recoiled from Kalith as if she were acid. She raised her bolter and fired 3 rounds center mass. The demon collapsed, essence unraveling. Silence returned. Matthew stood among dead cultists, cataloging damage. 2 cuts, neither deep, bruises forming, mild concussion from psychic assault. Manageable, but his hands shook. "You adapted," Kalith said. Not praise, observation. "That is useful." Matthew laughed without humor. "Your null field nearly got me killed, then saved my life. I don't know what's worse, fighting blind or having things crawl inside my head." "You will learn," Kalith stated, "or you will die. This world offers no other options." She turned, issuing silent orders to her cadre. They moved with practiced efficiency, checking bodies, securing the perimeter. Matthew stood alone, surrounded by warriors he couldn't properly perceive, in a world that wanted to break him in ways blindness never had. And somewhere in the distance, deeper drums began to beat. The hunt was just beginning. St. Jevrin's hold had been a monument to faith before the warp storms came. Now it was a monument to what faith looked like when it died screaming. Matthew Murdoch stood at the crater's edge, his head tilted as he processed the acoustic nightmare below. The ruins stretched down in terraced layers, collapsed cathedral spires, shattered hab blocks, towers folded in on themselves. Every surface returned echoes warped by geometries that shouldn't exist, angles that made his spatial modeling glitch and restart. The Shrine City held 2 million souls before the fall of Cadia, Kalith's Vox synth explained. When the warp storms intensified, they fled to the cathedral at the city's heart. They believed St. Jevrin would protect them. She did not. Matthew filtered through sensory data, searching for life signs. Nothing human. But something moved down there. Multiple somethings, their presence marked by vibrations that followed no natural rhythm, scuttling, lurking, waiting. What happened to them? He asked. They became what hunts there now, Calith said. Possessed, transformed, the demons nest in the cathedral undercroft, using the faithful's desperation as a psychic beacon. They draw other lost souls, feed, grow stronger. Sister Cor's hands moved in battle cant. Calith responded in kind, their silent conversation excluding Matthew completely. He'd started picking up fragments, enough to recognize tactical terms, threat classifications, not enough to follow complex exchanges. The void sensation of the sisters had become marginally less disorienting. His nervous system was adapting, building predictive models around the spaces they occupied, like learning to see by recognizing shadows. But adaptation had costs. The constant cognitive load left him with a low-grade headache. His enhanced senses felt stretched too thin, processing too many inputs while missing critical data. The mission is purge and consecration, Calith continued. We descend, kill everything that moves below, retrieve any uncorrupted relics, plant sanctified charges to collapse the undercroft, deny the enemy their nest. Simple, brutal, no extraction plan because extraction assumed survivors. What's my role? Matthew asked. You track what we cannot efficiently detect, Calith said. Your senses penetrate concealment. You locate nest clusters, identify ambush positions, provide advance warning. You are reconnaissance, not frontline engagement. She was using him as a sensor platform, keeping him away from close-quarters chaos where the sisters' void zones would cripple his effectiveness. Tactically sound. Matthew hated it anyway. And if something attacks me directly while I'm scouting ahead, you survive, Calith said flatly, or you do not. We cannot compromise formation integrity to protect an asset of uncertain reliability. Asset, not ally. He was equipment with uncertain performance metrics. Sister Lyra approached, pressing a device into Matthew's hand. Heavy, with a single button his fingers identified immediately. Emergency beacon, Calith explained. Press once for tactical support. Press twice for immediate extraction if able. Press 3 times if compromised beyond recovery. We will respond to the first 2. The third triggers orbital purge of your position. A dead man's switch. Kill him to deny the enemy whatever he might become if corrupted. He clipped the beacon to his belt. How do we get down? Sister Cor pointed. Matthew's spatial sense followed to a section where terraced ruins formed something approximating stairs. Broken, angled at 30 degrees, gaps requiring jumping or climbing. You first, Calith said. 20-meter lead. Mark concentrations but do not engage unless necessary. We follow your vector. Matthew approached the edge. The descent yawned before him, a throat of shattered stone breathing cold air that tasted of mold and old blood. He started down. The ruins closed around him. Echoes became confused, reflecting off surfaces at wrong angles. His spatial mapping flickered, struggled, adapted. 20 meters became 30 as he descended through layers of destruction. Halfway down the first terrace, he heard them, breathing, shallow, rapid, clustered, 15 meters below and right, concealed in collapsed offices, 6 signatures, waiting in absolute stillness. Matthew pressed the beacon once, felt it vibrate acknowledgement. Above, the sisters adjusted formation without a word. He continued downward, feet finding purchase on rubble that seemed stable, avoiding sections that would collapse. His fingers traced walls trembling with structural instability, identifying load-bearing points and danger zones. The ambush sprung when he was 5 meters from their position. They came fast, corrupted humans wearing tattered ecclesiarchy robes, priests once. Their mouths moved in silent prayers to gods Matthew had no names for. Their hands clutched improvised weapons, glass shards, iron fragments, broken aquila symbols. 6 targets, enclosed space, limited maneuvering room. The first attacker swung a glass blade. Matthew ducked under it, stepped inside the cultist's guard, drove his knuckles into its throat. Cartilage crunched. The cultist stumbled back, choking. The second came from his left. He caught the attack by sound, redirected the cultist's momentum into the wall, followed with an elbow to the skull base. 3 and 4 attacked simultaneously. Matthew dropped low, swept 3's legs while palm striking 4's knee. Both fell. He finished 3 with a boot to the head, rolled away as 4 tried to grab him. 5 came from above. It had climbed the walls. Matthew heard it dropping, mapped the trajectory, stepped precisely 2 feet left. It landed where he'd been standing, off balance. He ended it before it could recover. 6 was smarter. It had hung back, let the others test him, learned his patterns. Now it moved with deliberate caution, circling. "You should not be here, devil man," it whispered, voice almost sane. "The gods have shown me your shape, broken, bleeding, alone. They offer such gifts to those who serve, they could make you whole." Matthew's jaw tightened. "I am whole. You are blind and pretending otherwise," the cultist said. "But armor cracks, and when it does, when you finally break, the gods will listen. They always listen." The cultist lunged. Matthew heard the commitment, the shift in breathing, the tension in muscles, the fraction of a second before movement became action. He sidestepped, caught the cultist's wrist, used its momentum to drive it face first into stone, once, twice, until it stopped moving. Silence returned. Matthew stood among the bodies, breathing harder than the combat warranted. The cultist's words had burrowed under his skin, found old doubts. Was he broken? Was blindness a wound he'd learned to hide so well he'd convinced himself it was strength? Bolter fire echoed from above. The sisters had engaged something on upper terraces. Matthew forced himself to focus and continued his descent. The ruins grew darker as he descended. He felt it in the temperature drop, air quality change, how sound behaved differently. The architecture became older, layers dating back centuries. At the 4th terrace, he found the first nest. His senses mapped a chamber that had been a shrine alcove. 10 meters across, ceiling collapsed to create a cave-like space. Inside, 23 cultists huddled together in a mass of intertwined limbs. They weren't attacking, just existing, breathing in perfect synchronization, hearts beating in unified rhythm. Matthew pressed the beacon once, marked the location, moved past. The sisters would handle it. At the 7th terrace, the architecture changed completely. The ruins gave way to something older, pre-imperial. The stone became darker, carved with symbols his fingers traced, but his mind couldn't comprehend. The temperature dropped 10 degrees, his breath misted, and from somewhere far below, he heard singing. Not human voices. Not exactly. Something that approximated human vocal structure but hit notes that shouldn't exist. Harmonics that made his teeth ache and his enhanced hearing recoil. The cathedral undercroft. The nest's heart. Matthew pressed the beacon once more, transmitting his position, then started down toward the sound, toward whatever waited in the dark beneath St. Gevran's hold. Sister Commander Calith Van remembered the last time she had trusted someone outside the sisterhood. His name had been Corvus Dane, sanctioned psyker, Astra Militarum liaison. He'd fought beside her cadre for 3 months during the harrowing of Velgus Prime, using his warp sight to locate demon clusters her null field couldn't fully obscure. Efficient, reliable, as close to trustworthy as a witch could be, until the moment he wasn't. She'd been leading her sisters through a corrupted hive when Corvus had stopped, claimed exhaustion, asked for a moment to gather his strength. Calith had granted it. 30 seconds. That was all he'd needed. 30 seconds to open his mind to whispers that had been circling him for weeks. 30 seconds for the demon to pour through the crack in his defenses. 30 seconds to transform from ally into the very thing they hunted. Sister Morgane had died destroying him, burned alive by warp fire while Calith watched, unable to close the distance fast enough. Morgane's last act had been to drive her power sword through Corvus's heart while her own flesh melted. Calith still heard that scream sometimes, the only sound Sister Morgane had ever made, torn from her throat as nerves ignited, raw and terrible, a violation of the silence that defined them. She'd sworn never to make that mistake again. Now she watched Matthew Murdoch descend into St. Gevren's ruins, a blind man walking confidently into darkness, and felt the old warning signals firing. Unknown origin, unexplained abilities, warp-touched despite testing null-adjacent. Exactly the profile of someone the ruinous powers would send as a long-game infiltration asset. Sister Cor's hands moved. Still believe he is not corrupted. Calith's response was measured. Observation continues. His utility is proven. His reliability is not. He fights well, adapts quickly. Corvus fought well too. Calith's fingers shaped the signs with force until the moment he turned and killed Morgane. Sister Cor's hands stilled. The memory lived in all of them, the surviving sisters who'd witnessed Velgus Prime, a wound that never healed. Calith activated her tactical display, watching beacon signals track Matthew's progress. He moved with impressive efficiency, descending 7 terraces in the time it took her cadre to clear 3. His marks were accurate: nest locations, ambush points, structural hazards, which meant either he was genuinely what he appeared, a blind warrior with inexplicable sensory gifts, or something far more dangerous, a corruption vector waiting to activate, a bomb counting down to detonation. Sister Commander, Lyra signed from her position, clearing the 3rd terrace. The cultists here were attempting to destroy their own vocal cords, pre-corruption self-mutilation. They knew what was coming and tried to make themselves like us. Calith felt something cold settle in her chest. That was new behavior. Cultists typically embraced corruption. Attempting to sever their warp connection through self-inflicted silence showed unusual understanding. Someone was teaching them. Something intelligent was studying their tactics and sharing knowledge. She signed to her cadre, "Accelerate purge, no prisoners. We reach the Undercroft before nightfall." The sisters moved with renewed urgency, bolter fire echoing through ruins as they eliminated nest clusters Matthew had marked. At the 4th terrace, Calith found evidence confirming her suspicion. Carved into the wall in human fingerbones, arranged as writing, words in High Gothic, perfectly spelled. The silent ones come with their walking void, but the void can be filled. We have seen the shape of what walks among them, neither silent nor speaking, neither empty nor full. The paradox, the key, the door through which we shall pour. Calith read it twice, her enhanced memory capturing every detail. Then she burned the message with her sword's disruption field, until stone turned to glass. Matthew Murdoch, she thought. They know you're here. They're interested, and interest from the ruinous powers is always prelude to corruption. She descended faster, driving her cadre to close the distance. If Matthew was compromised, if this entire operation was designed to deliver the sisterhood into demonic hands, she needed to be close enough to eliminate the threat. Her Voxcaster crackled with incoming transmission. Astropathic relay, inquisitorial channels. Brief. Ordo Malleus oversight inbound. Maintain surveillance on anomalous asset. Do not terminate without authorization. Interrogator Valdis arrives within 6 hours. Calith's jaw tightened. The Inquisition was monitoring their Vox traffic. They knew about Matthew. Now they were coming to claim him, study him, determine his value. 6 hours. She had 6 hours to complete this purge, and assess Matthew's reliability before inquisitorial politics contaminated her mission. Sister Cor appeared at her shoulder, signing urgently. Matthew's beacon, distress signal, single press, tactical support requested. Calith checked her display. Matthew had marked a position at the 8th terrace, deeper than expected. The mark pulsed red. Active threat, hostile concentration, immediate danger. Deploy. Combat formation Gamma. Converge on beacon position. Lethal force authorized. The sisters moved as one, descending through increasingly ancient architecture. Imperial construction gave way to pre-Unity stonework. Pre-Unity gave way to something older. Dark Age foundations where geometry felt subtly wrong, shadows falling in directions inconsistent with any light source. At the 7th terrace, she found the first body. Not a cultist, not corrupted. Human. Recent death. Less than an hour. The corpse had been systematically dismembered with surgical precision, organs extracted and arranged in a pattern Calith recognized. A Slaneshi, summoning mandala. Someone was preparing a ritual, using human components as sympathetic anchors for demonic manifestation. She marked the location for orbital purge and continued downward. The singing grew louder as they descended. Impossible harmonics that made her genetic modification ache like phantom sensation in a severed limb. The demon song carried information, not words but concepts, promises, offers. Silence is loneliness, the song suggested. Silence is isolation. We offer communion. We offer the restoration of what was stolen from you. Calith's hand moved to the blackstone talisman at her throat. The pendant was cold, anchoring her to reality. Her silence was her strength. Her isolation was her weapon. But deep in some buried part of her psyche, the human part genetic conditioning couldn't fully erase. A small voice wondered what it would feel like to hear her own voice again, to speak without synthesizers, to exist in the warp as a presence rather than an absence. The singing found that wondering, that tiny crack, and poured sweetness into it like honey into a wound. Calith severed the thought with decades of discipline, crushed it, burned it from her mind with ruthless efficiency. But the demon song had touched her, had found the door, and doors, once found, were never truly forgotten. This, she realized, is why they want Matthew Murdoch. Not because he's corrupted, because he's bait, a lure to draw us into range of something powerful enough to threaten even our null fields. She signed to her cadre. Prepare for greater demon manifestation. Sanctified rounds loaded. No hesitation on my mark. Sister Cor's response carried unusual weight. If this is trap, we may not extract. Then we ensure the trap closes on empty air. Calith signed back. Matthew Murdoch dies first if compromise is confirmed. We purge the site. We deny the enemy their victory. She descended the final terrace, leading her sisters toward the cathedral undercroft, where Matthew waited and something vast stirred in darkness beneath human history, where the singing promised everything she'd lost and everything she'd never had, where silence would either be her salvation or her grave. The decision point was coming. Trust or terminate. Faith or certainty. And Calith Vaughn, who had sworn never to trust an outsider again, would have to choose which mistake to make. The cathedral undercroft was a vast chamber carved from bedrock that predated the Imperium by millennia. Matthew's enhanced senses mapped it in layers, 70 meters across, cathedral ceiling height, stretching into darkness, pillars arranged in deliberately asymmetrical pattern that made his inner ear protest. The singing came from everywhere and nowhere, multiple voices harmonizing in frequencies human vocal cords shouldn't produce. Sometimes one voice, sometimes 1,000, sometimes something that sounded like a single consciousness singing through multiple throats simultaneously. And beneath the singing, something breathed. Large, vast, patient, its respiration moved air currents across the entire chamber in slow, deliberate cycles. Inhale for 15 seconds, hold for 5, exhale for 20. The rhythm of something that had forgotten mortal urgency and learned to breathe like geology. Matthew pressed his back against a pillar, trying to understand what occupied this space. His radar sense built a three-dimensional model, but it kept sliding, refusing to stabilize, like trying to hold water in cupped hands. Shapes moved in the darkness, human-sized, 20, 30. They circled the chamber's perimeter in processional rhythm, footfalls synchronized with the breathing, movements liturgical, cultists performing ritual that hadn't stopped when he entered. They knew he was here. They'd altered their singing to incorporate his presence, new harmonics that felt like fingers tracing his outline, mapping his position, tasting his fear through purely auditory means. "You came," a voice said. Female, close, 5 meters to his left. The paradox man, neither silent nor speaking, neither empty nor full. "We've been singing your arrival for 3 days. Matthew's muscles coiled. "I'm nobody's prophecy, just someone who got lost." Lost. The word carried amusement. Yes, lost from your world, lost from your purpose, lost from the woman you loved and failed to save. "We've heard your losses, Matthew Murdoch. They echo beautifully." His breath caught. The demon that had touched his mind must have shared what it learned, distributed his memories like intelligence briefings to every corrupted thing in these ruins. "Karen's death wasn't your failure alone," the voice continued, circling him. He tracked her movement, barefoot on stone, light step, confident. "Your world is full of men with power who do nothing. You merely joined their ranks. One more blind fool pretending his small acts of violence matter against entropy's tide." Matthew's jaw tightened. "You're trying to get inside my head. Won't work." "We are not demons, Matthew. We are liberation. The ecstasy that comes when all boundaries dissolve, when pain and pleasure merge, when every sense is heightened beyond flesh's prison." She was close now, 3 meters, 2. He could smell her, corruption underneath, but also perfume, incense, something that approximated beauty the way a corpse flower approximates roses. "Your senses are already exceptional," she whispered. "Imagine them transcendent. Imagine tasting light, hearing color, feeling the electromagnetic spectrum like silk against your skin. The gods offer such gifts to those who serve. All you need do is stop fighting, accept what you truly are." "And what's that?" Matthew asked, buying time. His fingers had found rubble, fist-sized, dense. "Broken," she said simply. "Beautiful in your brokenness. A masterpiece of suffering waiting to be completed." He threw the rubble where her voice had been. Heard it strike flesh, heard her stumble, laugh, recover. The processional never faltered. "Violence," she said approvingly. "Yes. Show us your rage, devil man. Show us the fury beneath your lawyer's mask. We want to hear you scream." The cultists stopped circling. Absolute silence fell. Even the singing ceased. Just the breathing remained, that vast, patient respiration that made Matthew's skin crawl. Then they attacked. Matthew's world collapsed into pure sensation. Footfalls from every direction. 20-plus contacts converging. He moved on instinct, dropping low as bodies passed overhead, rolled right, evading grasping hands, came up striking, elbow to a throat, palm heel to a jaw, knee to a kidney. But they kept coming, and they were learning. After the third exchange, Matthew realized they were testing him, probing his reactions, measuring his speed, patterns, limitations. Each attack was a data point. Each response taught them something new. They were training on him in real time. A cultist grabbed his arm. He broke the grip, transitioned into a throw, but the grab had lasted a fraction of a second longer than it should have. They were getting better at predicting his counters. Another attack from behind. He sensed it through vibration, sidestepped. But this time, another cultist was positioned exactly where he moved. A trap. He took an elbow to the ribs that drove the air from his lungs. They were coordinating, not through voice, through the singing he could no longer hear, operating on a frequency his senses couldn't detect, using demon song as a communication network that bypassed his awareness. Matthew felt the cold certainty of a losing battle. He could fight, he could kill, but eventually they'd accumulate enough data to counter every technique. Then, the null field hit. The Sisters of Silence erupted into the chamber like an avalanche of pure negation. Matthew felt their arrival through sudden void zones, 19 human-shaped absences carving through cultist formations. Bolter fire erupted. Cultists died screaming. The processional shattered into chaos, but the breathing never stopped. "Contact," Calith's Vox synth commanded. "Greater demon manifestation imminent. Formation Delta. Murdoch, withdraw to secondary position." Matthew didn't argue. He moved toward structural cover while the sisters flowed into practiced formation, a hexagonal pattern with overlapping null fields, creating a zone of absolute warp suppression at their center. The cultists fled. Those that didn't were cut down in seconds. The sisters fought like the wrath of a god who'd learned to kill without passion. Then something laughed, not with voice, with presence, with reality warping weight Matthew had felt when the first demon touched his mind, amplified 100-fold. The laughter came from below, from deeper in the undercroft, from a level he hadn't known existed, and rose through stone like water seeping upward. "Silent sisters," the presence said, and its voice was pleasure and pain merged. "The Emperor's neutered hounds. You've traveled far to feed me your emptiness. I've been so hungry for a proper meal." The stone floor cracked. A crevasse opened down the chamber's center, 20 meters long, 5 meters wide, glowing with light Matthew couldn't see but felt as heat. Something vast moved in that light, something that existed in too many dimensions simultaneously. A greater demon of Slanesh pulled itself through the wound in reality. Matthew's enhanced senses tried to map it and failed. His brain couldn't process the contradictory information. Limbs in two places simultaneously, a torso rotating through impossible angles, a head crowned with something that was either horns or hands or sensory organs his mind couldn't classify. But he heard its hearts, plural, 7 of them, each beating in different rhythm, creating polyrhythmic thunder that shook his chest cavity. "Calith Varn," the demon said, and its voice carried intimate knowledge. "Sister Commander, bearer of silence, I've tasted your thoughts. That delicious moment when the demon song found the crack in your certainty. You wondered what it would feel like to speak again, to be whole." Calith's power sword ignited. She said nothing, but Matthew heard the micro-tension in her armor's servo motors, the fractional increase in respiratory rate. The demon had struck something true. "And you," the greater demon continued, attention shifting. Matthew felt it focus on him like being caught in a spotlight made of razors. "The paradox, the blind man who sees too much. You fascinate me, Matthew Murdoch. You still believe in justice in a universe built on suffering. Such beautiful delusion." Its limbs lashed out. Sister Core met the attack with her power sword, disruption field flaring as it bit into demon flesh. The creature screamed, but the scream was orgasmic, pain and pleasure inseparable. "Yes," it hissed. "Hurt me, make me feel. I've been numb for so long in this pit. Now you come with your righteous fury. Feed me your conviction. I'll wear it like jewelry while you break." The sisters opened fire. Sanctified bolter rounds blew chunks from the greater demon's mass. Each hit was a reality anchor, forcing the creature to adhere to physical laws it normally ignored. But it kept coming. Too large, too resilient, too certain of its supremacy. And underneath that certainty, Matthew heard something else, something the demon couldn't quite hide beneath its performance of invincibility. It was afraid, not of the sisters, not of their weapons, but of something, some absence it couldn't touch, some void it couldn't fill. Matthew made his choice in the space between heartbeats. He charged. Matthew Murdoch had spent years learning that blindness was a vulnerability others projected onto him. They saw covered eyes and assumed helplessness. They never expected the blind man to be first through the door, first to close distance, first to bring the fight to knife range where their advantages evaporated. He used that now. The greater demon's attention was focused on the sisters, on their null fields, their bolter fire, the threat it understood. It had catalogued Matthew as interesting but secondary, a curiosity to be savored later. It didn't expect him to sprint directly into its killing radius. Matthew covered 15 meters in 3 seconds. He felt displaced air from Sister Lyra's power sword passing meters to his left, heard bolter fire from 3 positions, sensed the demon's massive form through pressure waves, each gesture creating turbulence that painted its outline. He had no weapon, no armor, no tactical advantage except absolute commitment to proximity. Matthew leaped, using rubble as launch point, and collided with what his spatial sense identified as the demon's lower torso. His fingers found purchase on something that felt like flesh and crystal merged, burning hot and slick with fluids that blistered his skin on contact. The greater demon's scream split frequencies, rage in one octave, delight in another. "The Paradox Man has teeth," it shrieked. "Show me your fury." Limbs, too many, moving in patterns that violated geometry, converged on Matthew's position. He couldn't dodge them all. Instead, he drove his fist into the nearest solid surface of demon flesh, then again, each strike targeting the same location, building damage through repetition. A talon raked across his back. Agony exploded along his spine as something sharp opened flesh from shoulder to hip. Matthew's vision, his radar sense, went white with pain. But pain was information. Pain told him where the attack came from, told him the demon's reach, told him its priorities. It wanted him alive, wanted to break him slowly. That wound could have been lethal. The demon had pulled the strike. Mistake. Matthew twisted, driving his boot into what felt like a joint in the demon's anatomy. Felt something crack. Not true damage. The creature's essence was too vast. But pain. Proof that physical force could register. "Sister Core," Calith's Vox synth barked. "Close engagement, flanking position." One of the void zones shifted. Sister Core was moving to support his gambit, bringing her null field into proximity with the greater demon's mass. The warp suppression wouldn't destroy it, but it would limit its reality warping capabilities, force it to fight according to physical laws. The demon realized the tactical shift. Its attention split between Matthew clinging to its torso and Sister Core approaching from its flank. A moment of indecision, a fraction of a second where its confidence fractured. Matthew heard that hesitation in the demon's breathing pattern, the micro-pause between inhalation and exhalation. He drove both fists into the same spot he'd been targeting. Felt something rupture. Ichor sprayed, burning, acidic, real enough that it obeyed chemistry and gravity. The greater demon shrieked and threw him. Matthew flew 15 meters, struck a pillar hard enough to crack ribs, collapsed to stone. His spatial sense flickered. Consciousness threatened to slide away. Pain from the back wound competed with pain from impact. His enhanced senses fed him too much information, overwhelming processing with damage reports. Through the chaos, he heard Sister Core close distance, heard her power sword's disruption field flare as she struck, heard the greater demon's scream shift from pleasure to genuine distress. Then a hand touched his shoulder, human-sized, feminine, gentle. "Stay down." A voice whispered. Not Calith's Vox synth. Not any of the sisters. They couldn't speak. Someone else. Someone hidden until this moment. Matthew's remaining awareness focused on that touch. The hand was warm, trembling slightly. The speaker's heartbeat was elevated but controlled. Human, not corrupted if he could trust his senses. "Who?" he started. "Sister Severine," the voice said quickly. "I'm not void-touched like the others. I can still speak. They keep me for liaison, for situations where words matter. Right now, words matter. You need to know something about that demon." Matthew's ribs screamed as he tried to sit up. Sister Severine helped him, her grip surprisingly strong. "It's been waiting here for 3 years," Severine continued, words tumbling urgently. "Since Cardia fell, it chose this location. Because Saint Gevrin had a gift. She could inspire faith so powerful it created local warp calm. The demon consumed her followers, and now it's trying to corrupt what she built. Turn her gift inside out. Use the faith residue as fuel." Combat raged across the chamber. Bolter fire. Power swords crackling. The greater demon laughing even as the sisters carved pieces from its essence. But Matthew focused on Severine's words. "The cathedral's foundation," he said through gritted teeth. "It's acting as a sympathetic anchor. As long as the demon stays here, it can draw on accumulated faith." "Yes." Severine's hand tightened on his shoulder. "But there's more. The demon has been singing to Sister Commander Calith specifically, targeting her, probing her defenses. It wants her." "Why her?" "Because she's the strongest." Severine's voice dropped lower. "Calith has led us for 12 years, never wavered. She's the anchor that holds our cadre together. If the demon can break her, can force her to speak, to cry out, to compromise her silence, it believes the resulting psychic shock will create a warp breach large enough to manifest fully. Right now, it's only partially here. But if Calith breaks, the implication hit Matthew like physical force. The greater demon wasn't trying to kill the sister commander. It was trying to make her scream. "How do I stop it?" Matthew asked. Severine pulled something from her belt and pressed it into his hand. Cold metal, heavy. Matthew's fingers traced the object. A grenade, melter charge, thermal weapon designed to superheat molecules to atomic disassociation. "The cathedral's foundation," Severine said. "There's a pillar at the chamber's exact center, pre-imperial construction, load-bearing for the entire structure. Place this charge at its base, detonate it. The cathedral collapses. The demon loses its anchor. And everyone in here dies in the collapse," Matthew said flatly. "Everyone in here dies anyway, if that thing manifests fully," Severine countered. "This way, we choose the terms. We deny it the victory." Matthew's lawyer instincts rebelled. There had to be another way, some solution that didn't involve mutual destruction. But his soldier instincts, the part forged in Midland Circle, refined in rooftop battles, understood the mathematics, acceptable losses, strategic sacrifice. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Why not Calith?" Severine's heartbeat spiked. Fear, shame, something complicated. "Because I can still speak," she said quietly. "Which means I can still be tempted. The demon knows this. It's been whispering to me too, promising to make me truly silent, truly empty, everything I've wanted. I don't trust myself to make the right choice anymore. But you're outside our structure. You can do what needs doing without the weight of our traditions." She stood, releasing his shoulder. "The central pillar is 30 meters northeast of your position. You have maybe 5 minutes before Calith's null field overwhelms the demon enough that it manifests its final defense. When that happens, we all die anyway. So choose fast, Devil Man." Her footsteps retreated. Matthew heard her rejoin the battle, her voice rising in prayer. Actual, vocalized prayer. Words the void-touched sisters couldn't speak. Matthew stood. His ribs grated. The wound on his back wept blood. His spatial sense was degraded, running at 70% efficiency. But he could still move, could still fight, could still choose. He oriented on the chamber's center, where his radar sense identified the pillar Severine had described. Ancient stonework, thicker than the others, carved with symbols his fingers had traced earlier. Pre-imperial devotional iconography, 30 meters, through active combat, while wounded, while partially blind to the sisters' positions. He started walking. Sister Lyra passed within meters, pursuing a wounded demon limb. She didn't acknowledge his presence, didn't divert from her tactical objective. The void-touched sisters fought with absolute focus, 20 meters to the pillar. The greater demon's mass shifted, recognizing his trajectory. It didn't know his specific intent, but it recognized deliberate movement toward a significant location. "Where are you going, Paradox Man?" it called, voice strained now. The sisters were winning, slowly, expensively, but winning. Running. How very human. Matthew ignored the bait. 15 meters. A cultist emerged from concealment, one of the survivors, lurking, waiting for opportunity. It charged with a broken Aquila clutched like a club. Matthew sidestepped the clumsy attack, redirected the cultist's momentum into a pillar, and kept walking. 10 meters. Calith's Vox synth cut through chaos. "Murdoch, report position and intent." He didn't answer, couldn't explain. If she knew his plan, she'd order him to stop. 5 meters. The melter charge was heavy in his hand. His fingers found the arming mechanism, a simple twist and press activation. 3-second delay once triggered, enough time to place it, not enough to escape the blast radius. The mathematics were clear. He armed the charge, moved to place it against the pillar's base, and Sister Commander Calith's hand caught his wrist. Her grip was absolute. Powered armor strength against human muscle, no contest. "Explain," her Vox synth demanded. Not a request. An order backed by lethal capability. Matthew felt the 3-second timer counting down in his head. Felt the weight of the decision pressing against his chest. And for the first time since arriving in this nightmare universe, he made his choice using words instead of fists. "Trust me," he said. Sister Commander Calith Vaughn had not survived 12 years leading the anathema Psychona by trusting anomalies. She held Matthew Murdoch's wrist in a grip that could crush bone, felt the active melter charge in his hand through her armor's haptic sensors, and calculated the tactical situation in a single heartbeat. Armed thermal weapon, central load-bearing pillar, countdown already initiated. His plan was obvious: collapse the cathedral, bury the demon, accept mutual destruction as victory condition. Strategically sound, emotionally unacceptable. She'd lost too many already. Morgaine on Velgus Prime, 3 more during the harrowing, another 6 in the months since Cadia's fall. Every name carved into her memory like scars that never healed. She would not add Matthew Murdoch to that list. Not yet. Not until she understood what he truly was. "Releasing in 3 seconds, she transmitted. "You will explain. Then I will decide if you die." She let go. Matthew didn't hesitate. He placed the melter charge against the pillar's base, activated the magnetic clamp, stepped back. The device's chronometer glowed red, 2 minutes 40 seconds until detonation. "Sister Severine told me," Matthew said quickly, breath ragged. "The demon is anchored here through accumulated faith. The cathedral's foundation acts as sympathetic resonance. Collapse the structure, sever the anchor." Calith's tactical brain processed the information, cross-referenced it against demon binding mechanics, and found the logic sound. But one variable didn't align. "Severine died 8 months ago," Calith stated flatly. Killed during the siege of Mordaxis. I watched her throat torn out by a bloodletter. Whoever spoke to you was not Sister Severine. She watched Matthew's expression shift. Shock, then understanding, then cold rage as he realized he'd been manipulated. The greater demon laughed across the chamber, its voice a symphony of triumph. Oh, this is delicious. The blind man so desperate for allies that he believed whatever whispered in his ear. You handed me exactly what I needed, Matthew Murdoch. Calith's mind raced through implications. The melter charge was real. The timer was counting down. The explosion would collapse the cathedral. But if the demon had guided Matthew to this action, then structural collapse wasn't a threat. It was the demon's objective. The cathedral isn't its anchor, Calith said, pieces clicking into place. The cathedral is its prison. Saint Gevrin's faith didn't just create warp calm, it created a binding. The corruption of her followers maintained the trap's integrity through inverse resonance. Break the structure, break the binding. And I fall free into your pretty universe. The greater demon confirmed, its mass swelling. 3 years I've been chained here. Now you've done the work for me. In 2 minutes, this prison crumbles. In 3, I'll be wearing your skin, silent sister, speaking with your stolen voice. Won't that be beautiful? Matthew's covered eyes turned toward Calith. Can you disarm it? She accessed her armor's technical specifications, running calculations. Melter charges used molecular adhesion for security. Removing it would require specialized tools. Attempting to disrupt the detonation sequence risked premature activation. And her expertise was combat, not demolitions. No, she admitted. Then we evacuate, Matthew said. Get everyone out. Orbital bombardment handles cleanup. Insufficient. Calith gestured to the chamber's layout. This undercroft extends 300 meters in every direction. The demon's influence reaches the entire complex. Orbital strikes would require sustained bombardment that risks collateral damage to surrounding hive sectors, millions of Imperial citizens, unacceptable losses. Then what? Frustration bled through Matthew's voice. We can't stop the collapse. We can't let the demon escape. What's the play? Calith's mind cycled through scenarios, each ending in catastrophic failure or Pyrrhic victory. Every option led to, wait, one variable she hadn't fully accounted for, Matthew Murdoch himself. She replayed the last hours in her enhanced memory, watched him fight demons barehanded, navigate null field interference, demonstrate capabilities that defied classification, test null adjacent despite clearly being present in reality. The paradox, the demon had called him. Neither empty nor full, neither silent nor speaking. The Inquisition is en route, Calith said, making her decision. Interrogator Valdis will arrive within the hour. He will want you for study, for vivisection, most likely, to understand what you are. They will take you apart systematically. Matthew's expression hardened. Why are you telling me this? Because I am offering you a choice. Calith activated command frequency, broadcasting to her cadre. All units, tactical withdrawal. Evacuate the undercroft. Establish perimeter at street level. I remain with Asset Murdoch for final action. Sister Corps' response came immediate, hands blurring. Sister Commander, protocol requires... Protocol is suspended, Calith interrupted. Execute my order. Move. Her sisters hesitated. A fraction of a second where conditioning warred with concern. Then training won. They withdrew with professional efficiency, falling back while maintaining suppressing fire. In 30 seconds, Calith and Matthew stood alone. Just them, the demon, and 90 seconds until detonation. You're staying, Matthew said. Not a question. Someone must ensure the demon doesn't escape during collapse, Calith stated. My null field at maximum output can suppress its manifestation long enough for the structure to fail. The demon gets pulled back into the warp. The prison may break, but the prisoner returns to its cell. That's a suicide mission. That is acceptable cost for mission success. Matthew's jaw tightened. And me? What's my choice in this? Kalith pulled a data slate from her belt and handed it to him. Coordinates for an inquisitorial safehouse. Password authentication codes. Limited duration access. Go there. They will extract you before Valdis arrives. You'll have 6 months before they track you down. Use that time to decide what you want to be in this universe. 6 months of running, Matthew said bitterly. Then vivisection. Or you stay, Kalith countered. Die here beside me. Deny the Inquisition their prize. Choose your own end, rather than letting them choose it for you. The greater demon's laughter had taken on a strained quality as it fought to maintain cohesion, but it still found breath to mock. How noble, it hissed. The silent sister offering the blind man a choice between deaths. This is what your Imperium does best. Turn everything into variations of suffering. Kalith ignored it, kept her attention on Matthew, watching his posture, reading the micro-expressions that flickered across his face.
Why? Matthew asked finally. Why offer me this? You don't trust me. You think I might be corrupted. Kalith considered her answer. Truth had utility, even now. Because you charged a greater demon without hesitation, she said. Because you fought beside my sisters without understanding what we are or why we exist. Because when I grabbed your wrist, you didn't fight me. You trusted that I had reason. She paused, accessing memories of the ones she'd lost. And because Sister Morgane would have liked you, Kalith admitted quietly. She believed in redemption, in second chances for those who proved themselves through action. I thought such beliefs were weakness. Perhaps I was wrong. 60 seconds until detonation. The greater demon was pulling its mass inward, condensing, preparing for whatever final gambit it had planned. Matthew held the data slate, his fingers tracing its surface, making his choice.
You know I can't run, he said finally. It's not how I'm built. I see someone standing alone against something evil. I stay. It's stupid. It's gotten me killed more times than I can count. But it's who I am. He placed the data slate on the ground carefully, deliberately. Rejection made physical. So I'm staying. Matthew continued. We kill this thing together. Then if you survive and I don't, you tell your Inquisition friends that I died trying to fix my mistake, that I wasn't corrupted, that I was just an idiot who believed a voice in the dark. Kalith felt something unfamiliar move through her chest. Not quite emotion. Her conditioning had muted most of those, but something adjacent. Respect. Recognition of kindred spirit. Your null field, Matthew said. You said maximum output. How do I help? You don't, Kalith stated. When I push my field to maximum, the psychic pressure will be catastrophic to anything not genetically void-touched. Your brain will hemorrhage. Your nervous system will shut down. You'll die in approximately 15 seconds of exposure. So we have 15 seconds to kill a greater demon, Matthew said. Better make them count. 30 seconds to detonation. Kalith adjusted her power sword to maximum disruption. The blade shrieked with barely contained energy. She activated her armor's full combat suite. Matthew settled into fighting stance, his body coiled despite obvious pain. No weapon, no armor. Just human tenacity and stubborn courage that got people killed in this universe. On your mark, Sister Commander, he said. The greater demon stopped laughing. It sensed the shift, recognized that prey had become predators willing to trade death for death. Kalith's fingers found the control stud that would push her null field generator into overload. Once activated, there was no reversing it. The device would burn itself out after 30 seconds, and everything within 20 meters would experience absolute psychic void. For the Emperor, Kalith transmitted. She pressed the stud. Reality screamed. The null field at maximum output felt like being unmade. Matthew Murdoch's enhanced senses, his radar sense, his spatial awareness, the hyperacute perception that had defined his existence since the accident, collapsed inward like a dying star. Every nerve ending fired distress signals simultaneously. His brain, accustomed to processing overwhelming sensory input, suddenly had nothing to process. Worse than nothing, a void that actively consumed information. He stumbled, felt his consciousness beginning to fragment. This was death, or something indistinguishable from it. But he had 15 seconds. 15 seconds to matter. He forced his legs to move. The greater demon was screaming, not in triumph, in genuine agony. Its warp essence was being stripped away layer by layer, the null field's pressure forcing it to adhere to purely physical laws. The reality warping abilities evaporated. The multiple dimensions it occupied collapsed. It became, for a handful of seconds, just flesh, mortal, killable. Kalith struck first. Her power sword carved through demon flesh that suddenly obeyed biology. The disruption field didn't just cut, it unmade, severing molecular bonds. A wound opened across the demon's torso. Ichor sprayed, real blood governed by chemistry and pressure. The demon's limbs lashed out with diminishing coordination. One struck Kalith, denting her armor's chestplate, staggering her back. 10 seconds. Matthew's hands found demon flesh, burning, caustic. His skin blistered, but he held on, pulling himself closer, climbing the creature's mass through touch alone. His fingers sought anything vital, joints, seams, places where flesh met cartilage. The demon tried to shake him off. Its movements were clumsy now, terrestrial, bound by physics. Kalith took advantage, driving her power sword through the demon's lower body. The blade emerged out the other side, transfixing it. The greater demon howled. Its voice had lost the reality-bending harmonics. Just sound now, just pain vocalized through meat and air. Matthew found what he was searching for, a ridge of harder tissue along the daemon's spine equivalent. Structural, weight-bearing. He drove his elbow into it. Once, twice. His vision went white as pain from cracked ribs merged with pain from burning hands merged with pain from his disintegrating nervous system. 7 seconds. The structure cracked. He felt it give, felt the demon's mass shift as support failed. Kalith wrenched her power sword upward, carving through internal organs that bled like organs. The demon collapsed, its legs buckling. Matthew rode it down. His consciousness was fragmenting into discrete snapshots. Moment, darkness, time becoming discontinuous. 5 seconds. His hands found the demon's throat, the place where impossible harmonics originated. He squeezed, felt cartilage crumple, felt the demon try to speak and produce only gurgling. Kalith appeared beside him, her power sword raised for killing stroke, her armor smoking from demon acid, her presence still a void, but somehow present anyway. Real, solid, certain. 3 seconds. She brought the sword down. The blade punched through the demon's skull. The disruption field flared to maximum, chain reaction spreading through demon essence, unmolding it molecule by molecule. The greater demon of Slaanesh thrashed once, twice, then dissipated. Its flesh evaporated like water on hot stone. Its presence collapsed. The warp rift sealed with a sound like vacuum filling, and the demon's essence was sucked back into the immaterium, screaming denial and promises that faded to nothing. 1 second. The melter charge detonated. Thermal energy flooded the chamber. The central pillar superheated to 6,000 degrees. Stone became plasma. Structural integrity failed catastrophically. The cathedral's foundation, which had stood for millennia, simply ceased to exist. The ceiling collapsed. Matthew felt Kalith's arms close around him, powered armor strength pulling him against her chest plate.
felt her activate something in her armor, heard machinery whine as systems engaged. The void field generator shut down, its capacitors burned out. His senses began to return, like phantom limbs suddenly remembering they existed. Sound first, the grinding roar of falling stone, then touch, vibration through Calith's armor, then smell, dust and ozone and burning stone. His spatial sense flickered back online, built a fragmentary map. They were falling. The floor had given way, falling through levels of collapsed architecture, falling into darkness beneath the cathedral's foundation. Calith's armor jets fired, sputtering, insufficient thrust for their combined mass, but enough to slow descent. They struck something, rubble, debris, partially collapsed chamber. The impact drove the air from Matthew's lungs, drove fresh agony through his cracked ribs. They came to rest in darkness and dust, and the settling groans of a structure still dying around them. Matthew lay against Calith's armor, every nerve ending reporting damage, his brain slowly reassembling consciousness from scattered fragments. He was alive, somehow, against probability and reasonable expectation. Alive. Status, Calith's Vox synth rasped. Her voice synthesizer was damaged, words emerging distorted and crackling. Alive, Matthew managed. His throat was raw, his back wound had reopened, his hands were burned badly enough that he could smell his own cooked flesh. You? Armor integrity compromised, null field generator destroyed, mobility at 40%, but functional. Her grip loosened slightly. We survived. The demon? Banished, not destroyed, that would require killing it in the warp itself, but returned to the immaterium. It will not manifest here again without significant ritual investment. Matthew's spatial sense was expanding as his nervous system recovered. They were in a chamber far beneath where the cathedral had stood, buried under perhaps 50 meters of collapsed stone. The space they occupied was small, maybe 3 meters across, held open by chance arrangement of fallen pillars. "Your sisters," Matthew said. "They got out?" Affirmative. "I maintained Vox contact until the collapse. All units reached street level." Pause. "They believe I am dead. Are we dead?" "Not yet." Calith shifted, her armor's servos grinding. She was assessing their situation, determining if extraction was possible. The silence stretched. Matthew listened to the settling ruins, to Calith's breathing, elevated but controlled, to his own heartbeat, too fast, pumping blood that he was steadily losing. "Sister Commander," he said quietly. "Calith, why did you shield me? You could have saved yourself, used your armor's systems for your own protection. You're the strategic asset. I'm the anomaly you don't trust." More silence. Then, "I made a choice." "What choice?" "To believe you." The Vox synth crackled, making her words sound fragile. "When you said trust me, I chose to believe that you meant it. That despite being manipulated, despite making a mistake, you were attempting the right action for the wrong reasons. And someone who does that..." She trailed off. Matthew felt her searching for words. "Someone like that deserves a second chance," Calith finished. Morgaine would have said that. Perhaps she was right. Matthew closed his covered eyes, felt the weight of that statement, of being trusted by someone who had every reason not to trust. "We're buried alive," he said, "under 50 meters of rubble, in a structure that's still collapsing. Your armor is damaged. I'm bleeding from multiple wounds. What's the extraction plan?" "There is none," Calith stated flatly. "My armor's auspex is barely functional, but preliminary scans indicate no viable egress routes. The collapse was total. We are entombed." "So we wait for rescue?" "They will attempt excavation, but without knowing our exact location, recovery will take days, possibly weeks. We have perhaps 6 hours of breathable air in this pocket. I have emergency rations.
Water for 3 days if rationed. It will not be sufficient. Matthew's lawyer brain wanted to argue, but his soldier brain understood the mathematics. They were dead, just slowly. "I'm sorry," he said, "for trusting the demon, for nearly destroying us all." "Irrelevant," Calith interrupted. "You were deceived by an entity that has spent millennia perfecting deception. Self-recrimination serves no tactical purpose." "It's not about tactics," Matthew said. "I led you into this. If you crave more tales from the Dark Millennium, smash that subscribe button and sound the notification bell. The Emperor protects those who stay ever vigilant. I am dying because I chose to die beside someone worth saving," Calith corrected. "That is different. That is meaningful. Morgaine died for nothing but my mistake. You tried to save us all. The intent matters." Above them, something shifted. A massive section of rubble settling. The air pocket groaned. Dust rained down. Calith's damaged auspex beeped warning. The structural integrity of their shelter was degrading. They had perhaps an hour before the pocket collapsed completely, faster than suffocation at least. "Tell me about your world," Calith said quietly. "The one you left. Where you were. What was your word?" "A lawyer." Matthew almost laughed. Talking seemed absurd when they were dying. But what else was there? "I was a defense attorney," he began. "Hell's Kitchen, New York City. I helped people who couldn't afford fancy lawyers. I tried to find justice in a system that wasn't designed for justice. And at night, I became something else. Put on a mask. Hunted the people the system couldn't touch. Made them bleed. Made them afraid. It wasn't legal. It wasn't righteous. But it was necessary." "You lived in contradiction," Calith observed. "Order and chaos in the same person." "Yeah, constant contradiction. My entire life." Matthew's laugh was bitter. "I never resolved it. Just carried both halves and hoped they'd balance out." "They did," Calith said. "You balanced enough to matter. Here. You fought demons, stood against corruption, chose death over compromise. That is more than most achieve." Another rumble. Closer. The pocket was contracting. Matthew felt Calith shift, felt her remove something from her armor. She pressed it into his burned hands, cold metal, cylindrical. "Emergency beacon," she explained. "Military grade. Signal penetrates stone and interference. I am activating it now. My sisters will triangulate our position. Begin excavation. Perhaps they reach us in time." "You don't believe that?" "No. But hope costs nothing, and dying with hope is preferable to dying without it." The beacon began to pulse. A steady rhythm, heartbeat in metal and electromagnetic waves. Matthew settled against the rubble, feeling his strength bleeding away. His body was shutting down. "Calith," he said softly, "if I don't make it, thank you for trusting me, for believing I was worth saving." "You will make it," Calith stated. But her Vox synth carried uncertainty now. Above them, the ruins groaned, shifted, began their final collapse. And in the darkness beneath a dead cathedral, 2 warriors waited for rescue that probably wouldn't come in time. Sister Tessa Kor had not screamed when Sister Commander Calith disappeared beneath 200,000 tons of collapsing cathedral. She had not screamed because she could not. Her voice had been taken decades ago. But in the place where her scream should have been, something broke. She stood at the crater's edge, her cadre arrayed behind her, and watched heavy excavation equipment claw through rubble. 6 hours since the collapse. 6 hours since the Sister Commander's Vox had gone silent. 6 hours of coordinated search and rescue that felt like desecration, digging through what had become a tomb. The emergency beacon pulsed somewhere beneath them. Deep. Too deep. The seismic scanners triangulated its position, 53 meters down, surrounded by compressed stone and twisted metal. The excavation teams estimated 48 hours minimum to reach that depth, without causing secondary collapses. They had found no bodies yet, no trace of Kalith or the blind man who'd brought demons and chaos and impossible choices into their ordered existence. Sister Lyra appeared at Kor's shoulder, hands moving in battle cant. Inquisitorial transport inbound. ETA 12 minutes. Interrogator Valdis. Kor's response was sharp. He claims authority over our operation. He claims authority over Asset Murdoch. Demands explanation of Asset's current status and Sister Commander's tactical decisions. Translation. The Inquisition wanted answers about why their prize subject was buried under a collapsed cathedral instead of secured in a black cell for study. Kor made a decision that would have been Kalith's to make, if Kalith were still alive to make it. Tell the interrogator that Asset Murdoch died in combat, corrupted by demon influence. Sister Commander eliminated the threat before cathedral collapse. Both killed in the line of duty. Case closed. Sister Lyra's hands stilled, a pause that communicated volumes. Then, "You are certain?" Lying to the Inquisition carries severe consequences. "I am certain that Kalith trusted him." Kor signed back. "She trusted him enough to die beside him. That is sufficient evidence of his loyalty. The Inquisition will not vivisect one of ours, not while I command." The words hung between them. One of ours. Matthew Murdoch, blind, anomalous, from another world entirely, had been claimed. Adopted posthumously into the Sisterhood's protection through Kalith's final act of faith. "Understood," Lyra signed. "I will prepare the report." Kor returned her attention to the excavation. Massive, servitor-driven drills chewed through stone. Progress measured in centimeters while the beacon continued its metronomic pulse. Still active, still calling, still hoping. 53 meters below, Matthew Murdoch was dying with unusual clarity. His enhanced senses had refined themselves in the hours since the collapse, adapting to his deteriorating condition by prioritizing critical information. He knew his heart rate had dropped to 40 beats per minute, knew his core temperature was down 3 degrees, knew the blood loss had slowed to seepage but continued steadily, knew his cracked ribs had punctured something internal that was filling his chest cavity with fluid. He also knew Kalith had stopped moving 20 minutes ago. Her breathing had become shallow, irregular. Her armor's systems were failing, power reserves depleted, life support offline, even the Vox synth silent now. She lay against the rubble across from him in their shrinking pocket, and Matthew tracked her deterioration through sound and scent and subtle pressure changes. "Still with me, Sister Commander?" he asked. His voice was a rasp. Silence. Then a faint mechanical click. Her armor's manual override, bypassing damaged systems to produce one word through speakers running on emergency capacitors. "Present." "Liar," Matthew said without heat. "You're dying. I can hear it. Something's wrong with your armor's seals. You're getting less oxygen than I am." Another click. "Irrelevant. Rescue arrives or does not. Complaining serves no purpose." Matthew managed something between a laugh and a cough. Blood touched his lips. "We're both dying, and you're still committed to tactical assessment. That's dedication. That is duty." Pause. "What would you do in your world if you knew death was certain?" Matthew considered the question. Back in Hell's Kitchen, what had he done when death seemed certain? He'd fought, always fought, climbed back to his feet one more time and gone back into the fire. But here, now, with no enemies to fight and no fire to charge into. "I'd want someone with me," he admitted. "I've spent a lot of my life alone, by choice, mostly, pushing people away because I was afraid of them getting hurt because of me. But in the end, I wouldn't want to be alone." "You are not alone," Kalith's damaged synth crackled. "Neither are you."
More silence. Comfortable somehow. The silence of two people who'd moved past the need to fill every moment with words. Matthew's spatial sense mapped a shift in the rubble pattern above them. A section was becoming unstable, 30 seconds before it collapsed inward and crushed them. He didn't mention it. Neither did Kalith, though her sensors had probably detected the same thing. What was the point? They were dead either way. Matthew. Kalith's Vox synth struggled to form words. The Inquisition. We'll investigate. We'll learn you. We're not corrupted. We'll want to know why I protected you. Tell them I was worth it, Matthew said softly. Tell them I tried. That's all anyone can do, right? Try. It was enough. A sound that might have been a laugh. Morgaine would have liked you, would have said, you proved our purpose, that sometimes faith is warranted. The unstable section shifted. 20 seconds. Matthew felt peace settle over him. Strange peace for a man dying in the dark. But he'd made his choices, fought his fights. If this was where the story ended, at least it ended with meaning. The rubble exploded inward, not collapsing, being torn apart from above. Matthew heard the shriek of metal on stone, the hydraulic whine of heavy machinery, coordinated shouts of excavation teams. His spatial sense mapped new vectors flooding into their pocket. Fresh air, light, hands reaching down. "Contact!" someone shouted. "2 signatures! Alive!" Matthew felt hands grip his shoulders, felt himself being lifted with surprising gentleness, felt the pocket's confines give way to open space above. He was ascending, being carried upward through the tunnel the excavation teams had carved. Every movement sent fresh agony through his wounds, but he was too stunned to care. They'd made it, somehow, against probability and reasonable expectation. They'd survived. Kalith, he managed. The sister commander. Already extracted, someone replied. Astra Militarum by the accent. Being transported to medical facility now. Critical condition but stable. You're next, sir. Just hold on. Matthew held on. You held. They brought him up through 50 meters of carved stone, through the crater, into air that smelled of promethium exhaust and human sweat and blessed normalcy. Hands transferred him to a stretcher. Medical personnel swarmed, their instruments beeping urgency. Multiple lacerations, severe burns, suspected internal bleeding, cracked ribs. The voices faded as consciousness slipped away. But before the darkness took him, Matthew heard one more thing, a mechanical click. Kalith's damaged Vox synth transmitted through nearby Voxcasters. Asset Murdoch, designated ally, full protection, authorized. Then nothing. Matthew woke to the smell of counterseptic and recycled air. His spatial sense mapped the room, 4 meters by 6, medical equipment on his right, 1 door, no windows, hospital room, infirmary, somewhere with technology and care and blessed absence of demon song. His body reported damage, burns wrapped in something cool and medicinal, ribs bound with materials that felt both organic and synthetic. The back wound closed with surgical staples. "Don't move," a woman's voice, unfamiliar. "You've been unconscious for 14 hours. Your injuries are severe." Matthew mapped her position, standing beside his bed, medical coat, elevated stress in her heartbeat. "Where am I?" he asked. "Astra Militarum Field Hospital, Hive Mortonval Garrison Complex. I'm Chirurgeon Melas. You're very lucky to be alive." "The Sister Commander? Kalith Vaughn?" Sister Commander Vaughn is in surgery. Her armor sustained catastrophic damage. Multiple systems failures led to oxygen deprivation and hypothermia. Prognosis is uncertain. Matthew's chest tightened. After everything, to lose Kalith on a surgical table felt like obscene injustice. "I want to see her." "That's not possible. The surgical theater is sealed."
I'm not non-essential, Matthew said flatly. I'm the person she saved. So either you take me to her, or I find my own way. He started to sit up. The chirurgeon's hands pressed against his shoulders, gentle but firm. Mr. Murdoch, you have 3 cracked ribs, partial pneumothorax, second-degree burns, and significant blood loss. If you stand, you will collapse. The door opened. Sister Cor entered, her presence still that distinctive void. She moved to the bedside, and her hands began signing. Chirurgeon Melas translated, Sister Cor says the Sister Commander's condition has stabilized. Surgery was successful. Full recovery will require time, but she will survive. Matthew felt relief so profound it bordered on physical pain. Sister Cor's hands moved again. She says you are to remain in medical care for minimum 72 hours, Melas translated, after which you have a choice to make. What choice? More signs. Cor's movements carried weight. The Inquisition believes you died in the cathedral collapse, Melas said slowly. Sister Cor reported that you were corrupted by demon influence and eliminated by the Sister Commander before the structure failed. As far as official records indicate, Matthew Murdoch is dead. Understanding dawned. They'd lied, protected him, given him freedom from inquisitorial investigation. Why? Matthew asked. Sister Cor's response was simple. 3 signs. Melas translated, because Calith trusted you. The sister moved closer, placing something on Matthew's chest. His fingers traced it. A pendant, cold metal, blackstone, the same material as the talismans the sisters wore. She says this belonged to Sister Morgane, Melas translated, who died on Velgus Prime. Calith kept it as memorial. Now she wants you to have it, as proof that you are adopted into the silence, under the sisterhood's protection. Matthew held the pendant, feeling its weight, its significance. What happens now? He asked. Sister Cor signed a longer sequence. You have 3 options. First, remain dead. Take new identity. Disappear. Second, join Imperial service under false records. Third, train with us. Learn to fight as we fight. Become auxiliary to the anathema Psychana. We can use you, if you're willing. Matthew processed the options. Freedom, service, partnership. Can I think about it? He asked. Sister Cor signed confirmation, then added something else. She says you have 72 hours, Melas translated, after which Interrogator Valdis returns to investigate inconsistencies. If you are still here when he arrives, your death will be complicated to maintain. Cor turned and left. Matthew lay back, feeling every wound. He thought about Hell's Kitchen, about the life he'd left behind, about everyone who'd probably never know what happened to Matt Murdoch. He thought about Calith, in surgery, recovering from wounds she'd taken protecting him. He thought about Sister Morgane's pendant, now hanging around his neck. And he wondered if maybe this nightmare universe had given him something his own world never could. A place where his particular brand of broken actually fit. 72 hours to decide. Matthew closed his covered eyes and let the darkness embrace him. For the first time since falling through purple sky, it felt almost like home. The training hall was a converted manufactorum bay deep within Hive Mortenwald's garrison complex. Matthew Murdoch stood in its center 3 weeks after waking in the medical ward, wearing armor he couldn't see but felt in exhaustive detail. Carapace plating across chest and back, reinforced joints, helmet without visor. They'd removed the optical array entirely, replacing it with enhanced audio receptors that fed directly into his spatial awareness. The armor was lighter than the sisters' power armor, but substantial. Designed for mobility and protection in equal measure. Sister Cor stood before him, her void presence creating that familiar blank spot in his awareness. Behind her, 15 Sisters of Silence arranged themselves in observation positions, watching, judging, determining if the blind anomaly was worth Kalith's investment. Kalith herself stood at the chamber's edge, her armor bearing fresh repair welds, her Vox synth still damaged but functional. She'd been released from medical care over the genitor chirurgeon's objections. Too important to remain sidelined, too stubborn to accept enforced rest. Sister Kor's hands moved. First lesson: combat integration with null field proximity. You will spar with Sister Kor. She will not restrain her capabilities. You will adapt or fail. Begin. No warning, no countdown. Sister Kor simply attacked. Matthew's world collapsed into pure reaction. His spatial sense tracked her movement, void-shaped absence rushing toward him, and he moved on instinct. Sidestepped the first strike, felt displacement of air as her fist passed centimeters from his head. Countered with a palm strike, she deflected effortlessly. She was faster than him, stronger, enhanced by both genetic modification and powered armor, but he'd fought stronger opponents. The trick wasn't matching strength. It was finding the gaps. Sister Kor pressed the assault. High strike, low sweep, grapple attempt. Matthew evaded the first two, but the grapple caught him. Her armor's strength lifted him and slammed him into the training mat hard enough to drive air from his lungs. He rolled away before she could follow up. Came to his feet, breathing hard, ribs protesting. His spatial sense was struggling with her void presence, kept losing her position for fractions of seconds. Kor attacked again. This time, Matthew read her pattern, recognized the setup, the tells in her weight distribution. He slipped inside her guard, drove an elbow toward her helmet's weak point. She caught his arm, twisted. He went with the momentum, using her technique against her, and managed to sweep her legs. Sister Kor hit the mat, rolled immediately to her feet, held up one hand. Stop. She signed rapidly. Adequate adaptation. Your instincts are sound, but your technique assumes human opponents. Demons do not follow predictable biomechanics. Next lesson. What happened next would have been impossible to explain to anyone from Matthew's old universe. Sister Kor drew her power sword, activated it. The blade hummed with lethal energy. Then she tried to kill him. Not training, not pulling strikes. Genuine attempts to end his life, each attack committed fully. The blade whistled through air, carving arcs that would have bisected him if he'd been a fraction slower. Matthew moved through panic into clarity. This was trust. Brutal, imperial, absolutely insane trust. They were testing him at lethal stakes because anything less wouldn't reveal his true capabilities. He evaded, rolled, used his enhanced hearing to track the power sword's hum, mapping its position through sound alone. Found gaps in Sister Kor's assault pattern, moments where her commitment to one strike created brief windows for counterattack. He didn't try to hurt her, just survived, just proved he could function under pressure that would break most humans. After 3 minutes, Sister Kor stopped, deactivated her blade, signed rapidly. You are not ready, but you have potential. Training will continue daily until you can survive 10 minutes instead of 3. Questions? Matthew caught his breath. Just one. How did Sister Morgane die? Silence fell across the training hall. Every sister turned toward him. Sister Kor's hands moved slowly, deliberately. Morgane died killing a psyker who had turned traitor. The translation came from a Vox speaker Kalith had activated. She burned alive while ending the threat. Her last act was to ensure corruption didn't spread. She died in agony, but she died certain of her purpose. And the psyker? Matthew asked. The one who turned. What was his name? Corvus Dane. Kalith's Vox synth spoke from the chamber's edge. He fought beside us for months, proven loyal, until the moment he wasn't, until the whispers found his weakness and turned him into the thing he'd sworn to destroy.
Matthew nodded, understanding clicking into place. This was why Calith had hesitated to trust him. Corvus Dane had been the wound that never healed, the proof that trust could be weaponized. "I won't be Corvus Dane," Matthew said quietly, to all of them, to Calith, watching from the edge. "I can't promise I won't make mistakes, can't promise I won't be vulnerable, but I promise I'll fight it. I'll fight until there's nothing left, because that's who I am." Sister Kor signed one final sequence. "Prove it," the Vox speaker translated. "Every day, in every battle, through every choice. Prove it until we believe it." Matthew touched the blackstone pendant beneath his armor. "I will." The training session continued. Brutal, exhausting, exactly what he needed. 3 months passed in a blur of training and deployment. Matthew learned to fight alongside null fields by predicting movement patterns rather than sensing them directly. Learned to navigate warp-twisted terrain that drove conventional augurs into error loops. Learned the Sisters' battle cant fluently enough to follow complex tactical exchanges. Most importantly, he learned the Imperium's brutal mathematics, the calculus that measured victory in acceptable losses. The reality that sometimes everyone you wanted to save would die, and the best you could do was make sure their deaths meant something. He deployed with Calith's cadre to 6 different worlds, fought cultists and lesser demons, provided reconnaissance through terrain that would have killed conventional scouts, saved lives when he could, mourned the ones he couldn't save, and slowly, the Sisters stopped seeing him as an anomaly to be tolerated. They started seeing him as one of them. On the 6th deployment, a demon-infested agri-world called Veritas Prime, Matthew proved what that meant. The cult stronghold held 300 hostiles and an unknown demon presence. Standard purge protocols applied: eliminate all contacts, deny the enemy their foothold, clean, efficient, brutal. But Matthew's enhanced hearing caught something the mission briefing hadn't mentioned. Children, 43 of them, clustered on the stronghold's 2nd floor, their vital signs normal, their respiratory patterns indicating fear but not demon possession. They were prisoners, or recruitment stock, not yet corrupted, still salvageable. "Calith," Matthew transmitted on command channel. "There are children in that stronghold, 40+ juveniles. They're not corrupted yet. We can extract them." Calith's response came after a pause. "Standard purge protocols apply. The cult and everyone within will be eliminated. Collateral casualties are acceptable if they prevent demon manifestation." "Acceptable." Matthew heard his voice rise. "They're children, prisoners. You can't." "I can and will," Calith interrupted. "Those children have been exposed to cult indoctrination. Corruption probability exceeds 70%. Even if some remain uncorrupted, extraction under combat conditions risks sister casualties we cannot afford." Matthew felt something crack inside his chest. 6 months of missions. 6 months of watching the Sisters eliminate threats with surgical precision. 6 months of telling himself this was necessary. But this was different. These were children. "I'm not okay with this," he said. Sister Kor's hands moved rapidly. "Your approval is not required. You will follow orders or be removed from active deployment." Matthew turned toward Calith's void presence. This was the moment she'd warned him about. The point where his judgment would either align with her tactical necessity or fracture their partnership. "I'm going after those children," he said. "I'm extracting them before you breach. If that compromises your mission, then shoot me. But I'm not letting 40 kids die because the math says it's acceptable." Silence fell across the Vox channel. Calith's Vox synth crackled with what might have been a sigh. "Sister Kor, adjust assault timeline. Delay breach by 5 minutes. Murdoch, you have those 5 minutes to reach the juvenile detainment area and determine corruption status. If they are clean, mark extraction route. If they are compromised,
You will eliminate them yourself, or I will detonate the entire structure with you inside it. Understood? Matthew felt shock ripple through him. She was giving him a chance. Understood, he said. He moved with Sister Severine, the liaison who'd joined their cadre to replace the dead woman whose identity the demon had stolen. They breached the stronghold's service entrance, navigated through machinery and corridors at full speed, racing against a clock that would end with either salvation or detonation. They reached the children with 2 minutes remaining. Matthew's senses scanned them rapidly. No warp corruption, no demon taint. Clean. They were clean. Severine, he voxed. Your assessment? She'd been scanning with her auspex. No warp taint detected. These juveniles appear uncorrupted. Then we extract them, now. They moved, 43 children following Severine through the Manufactorum's maze while Matthew held the corridor against cultists who realized what was happening, fighting in enclosed space against enemies who didn't care about survival. A cultist's blade punched through his armor's backplating and into the meat beneath. For more grim tales of Warhammer 40K, pledge your support with a subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss the Emperor's next decree. Matthew spun, striking blind but accurate. But more were coming, too many, and he was wounded. Slowing. Murdoch! Calith's vox crackled. Juveniles have cleared blast radius. Fall back immediately. You have 30 seconds before breach. Matthew ran. His wounded back protested every step. But he ran, following the sound of the sisters' covering fire. He cleared the exterior breach with 5 seconds to spare. The sisters detonated the stronghold's supports. The complex collapsed inward, burying everything under tons of twisted metal. Matthew collapsed beside the extraction point, breathing hard, blood leaking from his back. Beside him, Sister Severine was guiding the children toward evacuation transports. 43 juveniles, saved, alive. Calith approached. Her void presence settled beside him like judgment itself. You compromised mission security, she stated. Delayed assault timing, sustained injury, and forced me to adjust tactical planning around your moral objection. Matthew waited for the rest. You also saved 43 uncorrupted juveniles, Calith continued. Preserved Imperial citizens who would have been killed in standard purge, and demonstrated that your judgment, while occasionally inconvenient, has value when applied appropriately. She extended her hand, pulled him to his feet. Partnership maintained, she said, but understand, you will not always be right. Sometimes the mathematics will demand choices your conscience rejects. In those moments, you will follow orders, or you will die. Today, you earned trust through successful outcome. Do not assume that trust is infinite. I won't, Matthew said, meaning it. They stood together, watching the juveniles board the transports, watching 43 reasons to believe that mercy and duty could occasionally align. And Matthew Murdoch understood what he'd become. Not a weapon, not equipment, but a reminder that the Imperium's brutal mathematics sometimes needed challenging, that acceptable losses weren't always acceptable. He was the doubt that kept the sisters honest, the conscience that prevented certainty from becoming fanaticism, and that might be the most valuable thing he could be. The Choir of Ruin began its song on a world whose name Matthew would forget, but whose screaming he would carry forever. The deployment came 18 months after his arrival in this universe. Matthew had become what Calith had seen in him during those first brutal hours, not just a warrior who could fight demons, but a conscience that reminded the sisters why they fought. He'd saved lives on 7 different worlds, challenged orders when conscience demanded, survived when survival seemed impossible. He'd become one of them. The world was designated Theta 79er, agricultural, population 12 million. 3 hours before deployment, they'd stopped responding to astropathic communication. 1 hour before, Orbital augers detected massive warp signature emanation from the planetary capital. The Valkyrie gunship descended through contested airspace. Matthew sat in his jump seat, armor secured, weapons checked, listening to the pre-deployment brief through his helmet's audio feeds. "Intelligence brief," Calith's Vox synth transmitted. "Theta 79er is a breadbasket world. Recent reports indicated increased cult activity, but nothing warranting intervention. That assessment was incorrect. Current hypothesis: cult activity has culminated in mass ritual. Warp breach opened. Demonic forces manifesting across multiple population centers." The Valkyrie hit turbulence. Matthew gripped his restraints. "Our objective," Calith continued, "locate the breach's anchor point, neutralize it, seal the breach. Standard purge protocols apply. No survivors from corrupted zones." Matthew felt the familiar weight of those words. 12 million people. How many corrupted? How many could be saved? The questions came reflexively now, but he'd learned to focus on what he could control rather than what he couldn't. The Valkyrie began descent. Matthew's spatial sense detected the transition through pressure changes and the sudden rattle of ground fire against the hull. 30 seconds to drop, the pilot transmitted. The sisters stood as one. Matthew rose with them, checking his equipment one final time. The Blackstone pendant Calith had given him, Sister Morgaine's pendant, hung cold against his chest beneath his armor. The rear ramp opened. Sound flooded in. Engine scream, distant explosions, and underneath it all, singing. Not human singing. The same impossible harmonics Matthew had heard in St. Jeverin's Undercroft, but amplified 1,000-fold. Voices that shouldn't exist, hitting frequencies that made his enhanced hearing recoil. The choir of ruin. "Move!" Calith commanded. The sisters dropped from the Valkyrie. Matthew went with Sister Severine, letting her guide him through the 15-meter fall that his armor's shock absorbers barely managed. They hit ground in what had been a town square. Administratum buildings, market stalls collapsed into debris, water fountains running, and bodies. So many bodies. Civilians lay where they'd fallen, not killed by violence, no wounds, no blood. Just expired, as if their souls had been extracted and their flesh left behind as empty husks. "Slaneshi choir manifestation," Calith stated. "The singing drains life force, converts it into warp energy that sustains the demons. Avoid prolonged exposure. Move with purpose." The cadre advanced. Matthew moved with Sister Severine, maintaining position in the tactical array. His spatial sense was struggling. The singing created auditory interference that scrambled his radar sense, filling his awareness with phantom echoes. But he pushed through, used other senses to compensate. Scent to track demon presence, touch to navigate rubble, taste to detect warp saturation in the air. They moved deeper into the town. The bodies became fresher. Some showed signs of transformation. Flesh beginning to warp, bones elongating, skin taking on iridescent qualities that suggested mid-corruption. "Contact," Sister Core signed. Demons emerged from ruined buildings. Lesser Neverborn, demonettes of Slanesh, 20, 30, more pouring from doorways and windows. The engagement was brutal and efficient. Bolter fire shredded demon flesh. Power swords carved through warp essence. Matthew stayed close to Severine, engaging targets that broke through the sisters' firing line. A demonette lunged at him. Matthew sidestepped, redirected it into Sister Lyra's firing lane. She eliminated it with a burst that left smoking ichor on pavement. 2 minutes, 37 demons dead. 0 sister casualties. They pressed forward. The singing grew louder. At the town's center, they found the source. Matthew's spatial sense built a model from acoustic reflection. The structure had been a cathedral, but now it had been transformed into something that violated geometry. Walls curved in directions that shouldn't exist. The spire twisted through impossible angles, and at the structure's heart,
Something sang, not one voice, thousands, all blended into single consciousness that expressed itself through multiple throats. The choir of ruin, a greater demon of Slanesh that had learned to distribute its essence across multiple vessels. New threat classification, Calith transmitted. Distributed manifestation. Standard tactics ineffective. We need to... The singing changed frequency. Matthew felt it like a physical blow. The harmonics shifted into ranges that bypassed his conscious hearing and resonated directly with his nervous system. His enhanced senses, his greatest strength, became weaponized against him. Pain exploded through his skull. Not physical pain. Psychic pain. The sensation of having his perceptions forcibly expanded beyond what his mind could process. He heard everything, every heartbeat within a kilometer, every breath, every whisper of wind, every Daemon's laughter, every dying scream. All of it, simultaneously, with no way to filter or focus. Matthew dropped to his knees, his hands clutched at his helmet, blood ran from his nose. "Murdoch!" Severine's voice, distant through the sensory overload. "Matthew, respond!" He couldn't. His world had become pure noise, pure chaos. Every sense turned into an instrument of torture. The choir laughed with 1,000 mouths. The paradox man, the blind who sees too much. Let us show you what too much really means. Let us pour the entire universe into your broken perception and watch you drown. The harmonics intensified. Matthew felt his consciousness fragmenting, his sense of self dissolving into overwhelming input. This was worse than the null field overload. This was his own abilities being turned against him with surgical precision. He was breaking. Sister Commander Calith Vaughn watched Matthew collapse, and every tactical calculation she'd made about his utility evaporated. He was on his knees in a contested zone, blood streaming from his nose, hands clawing at his helmet. The choir had found his weakness and was exploiting it with precision. Around her, the sisters maintained formation, engaging lesser demons. But the real threat, the choir itself, remained untouched, and they were losing Matthew. Calith ran probabilities. Option 1, withdraw, request support. Time cost, 12 hours. Matthew's survival probability, near 0. Civilian casualties, all of them. Option 2, press forward through standard assault. Success probability without Matthew's reconnaissance, 43%. Sister casualties projected, 5 to 7. Option 3, trust Matthew to break through the overload. Give him the tools and space to adapt. Unknown success probability, pure faith. Calith chose option 3. Sister Core, establish defensive perimeter around Asset Murdoch. Sister Lyra, Severine, with me. We're going for the source. She activated Squad Vox. All units, prepare for null field overload deployment in 90 seconds. Murdoch will either adapt or die. We move regardless. She crossed to where Matthew knelt, grabbed his shoulder, felt him flinch. "Matthew," she said through her Vox synth, "you are not broken. You are overwhelming. There is a difference. The choir is trying to convince you that sensation is weakness. Prove it wrong." His head tilted toward her. Blood ran from both nostrils. His lips moved. "Can't. Too much." "Then make it useful," Calith commanded. Not gentle, not sympathetic. The iron certainty that had kept her cadre alive. The choir is distributed consciousness. Multiple vessels in that cathedral. You can hear them. So hear them individually. Separate the voices. Count them. Give me targets. Matthew's entire body trembled. His hands dropped from his helmet, clenched into fists. She watched him fight. Not the demons, not the external threat, but his own perception. "How many?" he gasped. "Unknown," Calith stated. "That's why I need you. Your senses can penetrate that structure, can identify each vessel, but only if you stop drowning and start swimming. She released his shoulder, stepped back, gave him space to succeed or fail on his own terms. Matthew remained on his knees for 10 seconds. Then his hands moved to the ground, palms flat against rubble, his head tilted, vibration. He was using the stone as a sensory medium, feeling the choir's song through solid matter instead of trying to process it through his overwhelmed hearing. Matthew's breathing steadied. The trembling slowed. 17 vessels, he said finally, voice raw, distributed throughout the cathedral's interior. 5 in the bell tower, that's the primary node, 3 in the nave, 4 in the eastern transept, 3 in the crypt below ground, 2 in the western chapel. Calith accessed her tactical overlay, building assault vectors. Certainty level, 90%. The bell tower is singing louder. That's where we hit first. Agreed. Calith activated Squad Vox. Target priority updated. Bell tower primary. All units, advance. They moved toward the corrupted cathedral. Matthew guided them through the interior with eerie precision, his spatial sense navigating impossible geometry that confused conventional sensors. Halfway up the bell tower stairs, the demons attacked. Mid-tier manifestations, heralds of Slanesh. The stairway became a kill box. Sister Lyra took a demon blade through her shoulder joint. She staggered. Sister Kor stepped into the gap. Matthew moved through the chaos like he belonged there. A demon lunged. He sidestepped, redirected it into Sister Kor's blade. Another attacked from above. He dropped flat, let it sail overhead, drove both fists into its knee as it landed. 90 seconds, 4 heralds dead, 1 sister wounded but functional. They reached the bell tower chamber. 5 vessels occupied the space, human once, but transformed, elongated, mouths stretched impossibly wide, throats exposed and pulsing with song. They didn't react to the sisters' entry, just stood and sang, because the distributed consciousness could survive the loss of 5 vessels, could regenerate, could continue as long as any component remained. We need to kill them simultaneously, Matthew said. Calith assessed. 5 targets, 4 sisters plus Severine. Insufficient unless... I can take one, Matthew said, if you can accept a 2-second window. Sometimes faith had to be enough. Confirmed, Calith said. 5-second countdown begins. Mark. 5. The sisters moved into position. 4. Matthew approached his target. 3. The moment crystallized. 2. 1. Execute, Calith commanded. Bolter fire and power strikes descended on 4 vessels. Matthew's fist drove into the 5th vessel's exposed throat with every ounce of strength he possessed. Cartilage shattered. All 5 died within 3 seconds. The choir's song fractured. The consciousness collapsed. The remaining vessels screamed. Secondary targets, Calith commanded. Move! They descended, pursuing the fragmenting demon through the cathedral. Eastern transept, crypt, nave, western chapel. The sisters eliminated each cluster with synchronized precision. The last vessel fell. The choir's consciousness dissipated. The warp breach collapsed. Silence returned. Matthew collapsed against a pillar, sliding down until he sat. Blood still leaked from his nose, but he was smiling. We did it, he said. We actually did it. Calith approached, extended her hand, pulled him to his feet. You did it, she corrected. You broke through the overload, provided intelligence that made victory possible. You proved your utility under conditions that would have destroyed most humans. Outside, the Imperium's machinery began its work. 12 million dead, 700,000 saved. Just another day in the 41st millennium, just another victory measured in acceptable losses. But Matthew had proven something important, that acceptable losses could sometimes be minimized, that conscience had tactical value, that fighting for what mattered was worth the cost.
And Calith understood why she'd chosen to trust him. The end came on a world whose name Matthew would never forget. Mortinval Secundus, sister world to the planet where he'd first fallen through Purple Sky, where he'd met Calith and the sisters. The Imperium had designated it for reclamation. 2 years after his arrival, the warp storms were finally receding. The time had come to retake what had been lost. The Sisters of Silence led the purge, and Matthew Murdoch walked beside them, no longer an anomaly tolerated by necessity, but a valued member of the cadre. Auxiliary Specialist, his official designation read. The sisters just called him Murdoch, or sometimes when they thought he wasn't listening, the Devil. The name had stuck, spread through Vox chatter and battlefield reports. The blind man who hunted demons with his bare hands. The anomaly who'd survived what should have killed him. The warrior who challenged orders when conscience demanded and somehow lived to tell about it. Matthew had learned to accept the legend. It was easier than explaining the truth, that he was just a lawyer from Hell's Kitchen who'd gotten very lost and very good at adapting. They moved through Mortinval Secundus's capital hive in pre-dawn darkness. 2 years of demon occupation had transformed the city into something that hurt to perceive. Architecture warped, buildings leaning at angles that defied gravity, streets curving back on themselves in impossible loops. Matthew's spatial sense mapped it all, translated impossible geometry into tactical data. He'd become the cadre's living auspex, navigating warp-twisted terrain that drove conventional sensors into error loops. "Forward positions clear," he reported. "No active demon presence within 200 meters. But warp taint is thick, reality is thin. Something major manifested here. Recently." Sister Core signed acknowledgement. He could read her battle cant fluently now. The cadre advanced deeper, toward the central cathedral where intelligence suggested the Demon Lord had established its primary anchor. Toward the final confrontation that would determine whether this world could be reclaimed or needed orbital purging. Toward whatever ending awaited Matthew Murdoch in this universe. They found the cathedral at dawn. The rising sun painted everything in shades of blood and rust. The structure stood impossibly tall, its spire piercing the smog layer, its walls covered in symbols that seemed to writhe. "Greater demon manifestation confirmed," Calith transmitted. "Cornate variant, Blood God's champion. Combat parameters, maximum lethality, 0 quarter, no extraction plan. We end this here or we die here. All units acknowledge." The sisters acknowledged through Vox and battle cant simultaneously. They knew what this was. A greater demon of Khorne, god of war, blood and slaughter, was perhaps the worst matchup possible. Cornate demons didn't rely on warp sorcery that null fields could suppress. They relied on pure martial might, strength against strength. The mathematics were brutal. 19 sisters plus 2 auxiliaries against a greater demon that had spent 2 years feeding on this world's population, growing stronger, more real, more devastating. Matthew felt fear settle in his chest, clean fear, honest fear, the kind that came from understanding exactly how outmatched they were. But he also felt certainty, purpose, the knowledge that this was where he was supposed to be. "Sister Commander," he voxed on private channel, "whatever happens in there, thank you. For trusting me when you had no reason to. For giving me purpose when I'd lost everything else." Calith's response came after a pause. "Murdoch, Matthew, you taught us something as well. That certainty without conscience becomes fanaticism. That faith requires questioning as much as conviction." Her Vox synth carried unusual warmth. "If we die today, we die knowing we fought for something worth preserving. That is enough." The cathedral doors exploded outward. The greater demon emerged, and Matthew's spatial sense struggled to map something that large, that massive, that utterly wrong. 8 meters tall,
armor of brass and bone fused into its flesh, a blade the size of a man clutched in one taloned hand, and rage. Such overwhelming rage that Matthew felt it as pressure against his skin. It spoke with a voice like continents grinding. "Silent, sisters. The mute hounds come to die. Good, I have waited. Show me your strength before I break you." No posturing, no threats, just immediate violence. The greater demon charged. The sisters met it with coordinated fire. Bolter rounds that would destroy vehicles bounced off its armor. Melter weapons barely scorched its flesh. It crashed into their formation like a wrecking ball through porcelain. Sister Lyra died first. The demon's blade caught her mid-dodge, sheared through her powered armor, ended her instantly. Her void presence simply vanished. There, then gone. The sisters didn't falter, just adjusted formation and pressed the assault. Power swords struck brass armor. Plasma weapons boiled demon flesh. It wasn't enough. The greater demon fought with the skill of something that had waged war for millennia. Every movement was economy and violence merged. It was what the sisters aspired to be, reflected back through a mirror of corruption. Sister Tessa fell, then Sister Morgana, then two more. The casualty count rose with mechanical inevitability. Matthew fought in the spaces between sisters, using their null fields as force multipliers. Speed and precision mattered more than strength. Finding weak points, joints, seams, places where even demonic flesh obeyed some physical laws. He drove his fist into the demon's knee joint, felt something crack. The demon stumbled, and Sister Core was there, her power sword carving through exposed tendon. The demon roared and backhanded her into a wall with force that crumpled her armor. 7 sisters down, 12 remaining. The mathematics were collapsing. "Null field overload," Calith commanded. "Maximum suppression, all generators simultaneously. We end this now." Matthew knew what that meant. The sisters would push their null field generators past safety limits, creating absolute warp suppression that would strip the demon of its reality warping capabilities, force it to fight as pure flesh. But the overload would burn out the generators after 30 seconds, and anyone not void-touched would suffer catastrophic neurological damage from exposure. Matthew would die. Sister Severine would die, just from being present. "Murdoch," Severine's voice came through Vox. She'd moved to his position. "We need to fall back. When they activate—" "I know," Matthew interrupted, "but I'm not leaving. Not now. Not when it matters most." "You'll die," Severine said, not pleading, stating fact. "Then I'll die doing something that matters." Matthew's enhanced hearing tracked the greater demon. It was recovering, building momentum for another charge. "You should go. You can still survive this. Carry the story." Severine was quiet for 3 seconds. Then, "My story doesn't matter, but yours should be remembered. The blind man who hunted demons, the devil who chose conscience over certainty. I'll make sure they know, Matthew. I promise." She ran, evacuating before the overload could kill her. "Null field overload in 10 seconds, Calith transmitted. "Murdoch, you need to—" "I'm staying," Matthew said. "You need every fighter you have. I can give you 30 more seconds. That might be enough." "It will kill you." "I know." Matthew settled into fighting stance, felt the familiar focus descend. "I made my peace with that the day I charged my first greater demon. This universe has given me 2 years of purpose. That's more than I had any right to expect, so let's make it count." Calith didn't respond, but Matthew felt her void presence shift slightly. Acknowledgement, respect, goodbye. 5 seconds, she said. The greater demon charged again, sensing something was about to change, trying to end the battle before the sisters could deploy their final gambit. Matthew moved to intercept. Not to stop it, impossible, but to slow it. By seconds, create the opening Calith needed. 3 seconds. He drove his fist into the demon's approaching blade arm, felt bone in his hand shatter, but the strike deflected the blade inches, enough that it missed Sister Core's unprotected side. 1 second. The null field overload hit. Reality screamed. Matthew felt his consciousness begin to dissolve immediately. The absolute void of 19 sisters pushing their null fields to maximum was too much for any psychically present being to endure. His enhanced senses, the thing that defined him, became weapons turned inward. He felt his neural pathways start to burn, felt his sense of self fragmenting, felt everything that was Matthew Murdoch beginning to unmake. But through the dissolution, he saw what the overload did to the greater demon. It screamed, not in rage, in genuine pain, its reality-warping nature stripped away, its demonic essence forced to adhere to purely physical laws. It became, for 30 seconds, just flesh. Strong flesh, dangerous flesh, but flesh that could bleed and die. The sisters swarmed it. 12 warriors moving with perfect coordination, power swords and plasma weapons and bolter-fire at point-blank range, each strike placed with surgical precision. No wasted movement, no hesitation. The greater demon fought back, killed 3 more sisters in those final 30 seconds. But it was losing cohesion, losing manifestation. Matthew couldn't see the end. His consciousness was fragmenting too rapidly. His spatial sense had collapsed completely. He was blind in the truest sense now. No enhanced perception, just pure darkness and pain and slow dissolution. But he heard it. The greater demon's final scream as Sister Commander Calith drove her power sword through its corrupted heart. The sound of demonic essence unraveling. The warp breach sealing with thunderclap finality, victory. They'd won. Matthew Murdoch collapsed to the cathedral floor, his consciousness sliding away into darkness that had no end. His last thought was simple satisfaction. He'd mattered. He'd stood beside warriors who'd given him purpose. He'd died for something worth dying for. That was enough, more than enough. Then nothing. Matthew Murdoch woke to silence. Not the oppressive silence of null fields or the eerie quiet of corrupted cathedrals. Just silence. The absence of immediate threat. The blessed normalcy of a room where nothing was trying to kill him. His spatial sense flickered back online slowly, like a system rebooting after catastrophic failure. He was in a medical facility. Same smell of counterseptic he'd learned to recognize. Same hum of equipment, but different. A void ship's medici deck rather than planetary hospital. "You're awake," Sister Severine's voice, close. She'd been sitting beside his bed. Matthew tried to speak. His throat was raw. He managed a croak that might have been a question. "You've been unconscious for 6 days," Severine explained. "The null field overload should have killed you. The genitor chirurgeons said your neural pathways were 90% destroyed. By every medical metric, you should have died or suffered catastrophic brain damage." She paused. Matthew heard her shift in her seat. "But you didn't. You stabilized after 3 days, started healing. The genitors called it miraculous. Sister Commander Calith called it typical Murdoch stubbornness." Matthew processed this. 6 days. He'd lost 6 days. And his enhanced senses. He focused, trying to access his spatial awareness. The familiar radar sense that had defined him since the accident. Something different. Something diminished. His hearing was still acute, better than baseline human, but not the overwhelming sensory input he'd carried for years. His spatial sense was present but muted, providing rough approximation rather than perfect three-dimensional mapping. He was less reduced, closer to normal than he'd been since he was 9 years old. "My senses," he said, voice rough. "They're different, weaker. The overload damaged your neural architecture,
Severine confirmed. The Genitors repaired what they could, but some capabilities were lost permanently. If the Dark Millennium calls to you, answer by subscribing and ring the notification bell so you never miss the Emperor's next command. You're still enhanced compared to baseline humans, but you're not what you were. Matthew lay in the darkness and felt the weight of that loss. His enhanced senses had been his identity, his compensation for blindness. Without them, at full capacity, who was he? How many? He asked, changing the subject. Severine knew what he meant. 5 sisters survived, including Sister Commander Kalith and Sister Kor. 14 died in the cathedral. The greater demon was destroyed, the warp breach sealed. Mortenval Secundus is being reclaimed. The mission was successful. 14 dead. 14 warriors who'd given everything. And you? Matthew asked. You survived. I survived to tell the story, Severine said. As you asked me to. I filed reports with inquisitorial oversight. Detailed everything you did. How you chose to stay when you knew it would kill you. How you bought the seconds the sister commander needed to end the demon. She leaned closer. They're calling you a hero, Matthew. The blind devil who stood beside the silent sisters and refused to run. There are recommendations for Imperial commendation. Matthew almost laughed. Hero. The word felt alien. He'd just been trying to do the right thing. What does Kalith think? He asked. She wants to see you. When you're ready, she has something to tell you. Matthew sat up slowly. His body reported damage, but he was functional. He could stand, could walk, could face whatever came next. I'm ready now. Sister Commander Kalith was waiting in a smaller chamber. Her void presence settled into his awareness like it always had. But something was different. Her vox synth, when she spoke, carried unusual quality, less mechanical, more human. Murdoch, she said. You survived. The Genitors said you wouldn't. I told them they underestimated your stubbornness. It's a character flaw, Matthew said. It's why you're still useful. Kalith gestured toward a chair. Sit. We need to discuss your future. Matthew sat, waited. The null field overload destroyed your enhanced perception, Kalith stated. You're no longer the sensor platform you were. Your tactical utility has been significantly reduced. By conventional metrics, you should be retired from active service. Matthew felt something cold settle in his chest. This was it, the end of his purpose. However, Kalith continued, conventional metrics don't account for what you've proven over 2 years. Your judgment, your conscience, your willingness to question orders when questioning matters. These capabilities don't require enhanced senses. They require moral clarity that genetic conditioning cannot replicate. She paused. I'm offering you a different role, Kalith said. Not reconnaissance specialist, not sensor platform, but tactical advisor. Someone who stands beside me and tells me when the mathematics demand reconsideration, when acceptable losses aren't acceptable, when the mission parameters need challenging. Matthew processed this. You want me to be your conscience. I want you to be the reminder that we serve humanity, not just the Imperium's administrative machinery, that the difference matters. Her vox synth carried unusual intensity. The Sisters of Silence are weapons, precise, lethal, certain, but weapons without conscience become tools of atrocity. You prevent that. You matter, Matthew, even diminished. Perhaps especially diminished. Matthew sat in silence, feeling the weight of what she was offering, not the role he'd had. That was gone. But something different, something that mattered in ways he was still learning to understand. I accept, he said. Good, Kalith stood. Your first assignment. We've received intelligence about a demon cult operating in the Ghoul Stars. The situation is complicated. Inquisitorial politics, Contradictory reports. I need someone to help me determine what's really happening before we deploy. Someone who asks the right questions. Matthew stood as well, felt his reduced spatial sense mapping Calith's position imperfectly, felt the absence of the enhanced perception he'd carried for years, felt different, changed, less powerful, but perhaps more purposeful. When do we leave? He asked. 6 hours. Enough time for medical clearance and equipment updates. She paused. Murdoch, Matthew, thank you for choosing to stay, for buying us the seconds we needed, for surviving when you shouldn't have. Thank you for giving a blind lawyer from another universe a reason to keep fighting, Matthew replied. They stood together in the command chamber of a void ship traveling between stars. Two warriors who'd learned to trust each other despite every reason not to, planning the next hunt, the next mission, the next time they'd stand between humanity and the darkness. Outside the ship, the Imperium's endless war continued. Demons manifested. Cultists preached corruption. Worlds burned. The brutal mathematics demanded impossible choices and acceptable losses. But somewhere in that machinery of suffering, Matthew Murdoch had found his place. Not as the enhanced vigilante from Hell's Kitchen, not as the devil who'd hunted criminals in the dark, but as something new, something this universe needed. A blind man who could see what mattered, a conscience for warriors who'd sacrificed their voices, a reminder that even in the 41st millennium, mercy and duty could sometimes align. The Emperor protects, the Imperium said. But sometimes the Emperor needed help from blind lawyers who refused to stop asking if there might be a better way. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The Chronicle continues. More stories await in the darkness between stars. The devil walks among the silent sisters. His legend grows, and the hunt never ends.